Going live now. All right. Hello, everyone. Today I am with DancingSean again. We are going to be talking about our top 10 series, TV series, web series, pretty much just any series that is out from the beginning of time till now. So, once again, I'm going to have Sean introduce himself if people are unaware who he is. So.
I'll say, Eric, I didn't consider web series. Maybe I should have thought about Homestar Runner. I don't know, but to introduce myself, Flint and I, we go way back. We've worked together on a few different projects over the years, and I have always been a big fan of film, and in recent years, kind of shifted that appreciation to include television. I've always thought I was like inspired by an English teacher I had one time, and just all the elements of literature, themes and symbolism and stuff like that. I try to apply that to movies and TV also,
Yeah.
character development. And, it's a lot more than just plot. And in film, you also get things like editing and lighting, performances, stuff like that that can add extra layers. Um, anyway, I guess you can follow me if I'm saying stuff that's
Yeah.
interesting enough. I'm DancingSean on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel. Right now, I've been trying to build up a catalog of 1 minute videos where I do like a preview of a movie, where like I give you an idea of like what it's about, the genre, the tone, the stars and director, stuff like that, but without spoiling the plot, just to give you an idea of what it is, whether or not you might like it. Um, Also covered The Boys TV show. It's an Amazon subversive superhero show.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably do other stuff.
And Knockfires.
What's that?
Oh, Knockfires just I said, hey.
Oh, cool. Hello to anyone and everyone out there. What else? What else should I say to introduce myself? Is that good enough?
No, that's good enough. That's good enough. So last time we did the top 10 movies and it went like 2 hours long, and we were originally going to do movies and TV shows, but obviously it's so much, and we didn't even do like 10. It was 10 of each, so it was like 20 shows, or TV movies. So anyways, this will go long, potentially, like minimum hour, but most likely 2 hours. But
Yeah, if we were just gonna like list off 10 shows, that might take
true.
5 minutes, but that wouldn't be very interesting. We're gonna talk about why we chose these shows, other shows that didn't make the list, maybe little synopsises of the shows or why you
Mhm.
should watch them.
Yes.
We're gonna generate discussion. We might even get into other elements beyond film. One thing that you know media like this inspires different talk and consideration relations to other parts of the world. So there's a decent chance we'll dip into that.
Also, another thing, like last time when we did this, it was my top 10 and Sean's top 10, but we didn't do my sister Akadi. So we're gonna give a chance for Akadi to have her top 10 series, which will be controversial probably, between us and her, but it'll be fun. Obviously this is part of it is to have fun, but I mean, movies and TV shows are just fun topics to talk about. Well, at least with me and Sean. So, so we're just gonna. Well, do you have anything else before we dive into this?
Yeah, I do want to preface it with a couple thoughts. One, just the idea that there are different types of lists that you might make,
That's true.
right? And we talked about this with the movies also. There's a difference between what might be my personal favorites, and sometimes that might just be like what I saw when I was 14 or something I saw with my mom or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, right? Um, and then there will be other things. There like another list might be like what you think is the best, like the best made stuff, the best performances, the best direction or whatever, which might be hard to analyze, or
True.
maybe a film critic might have different thoughts than someone who's more of a casual viewer. But even a casual viewer might understand that one movie or TV show is made better than something else that's their favorite. Um,
Right. Right.
and then there's also another list, or I know there's probably a bunch of different ways, but I think what I was focusing on today, the task you gave me was what I think is important for everyone to see, right? A must watch list. And that might include things that like for movies, for example, even if you're not a fan of Star Wars or Superman,
Yep.
well, you should still see it. It's still like part of like the world and culture, something you should be familiar with, even if
Right.
it's
Right.
not particularly well made or particularly a favorite of yours. There's certain things that are sort of pieces of culture that everyone should be aware of or take part in or be familiar with. And so my list is a little more geared to that. Now, a lot of times these lists, of course, are going to have a lot of crossover. A lot of the
Yeah.
best made stuff is also going to be my favorite stuff, is also going to be like important stuff to watch or whatever. But I just want to clarify that this list I'm going to put out today is a little bit more shifted toward must watch and is not necessarily in order. It was hard enough for me to narrow down what my top 10 was, much less put it in order. So keep that in mind as we go through it all.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So with that, we are going to go to our first picks. So we'll just like do it in order. We'll do Sean first, then my sis, and then me. Actually, maybe we should just do my sis first.
No, I should actually, before we get too deep into it, give one more preface that it's hard for me to just give a simple, straight answer. I'm always going to have like this flow of thoughts about everything, and so maybe in general, I want to say this, but probably also as we go through the list, I'll point out sometimes like certain slots. Like when you make a top 10 list, here's a couple factors. Well, actually, I'm going to say a couple more things. Can I say a couple more things before we dive in there?
Absolutely.
Because I'm realizing I have other little pieces of this I want to say. One is that just the nature of making lists is that sometimes you want to represent different things in your list.
That is absolutely true.
Right. Even if I was making what I thought was the best made or my favorite, some especially in the past, I've kind of, this is like something I've evolved over time, but I realized like it's just a bunch of crime dramas. It's like Sopranos and The Wire and Breaking Bad. Like, well, and those are all good. I like them. They're important to see, but I don't think it's a good list to have only that. There's also like comedies and animation and all kinds of other things that you might want to include on your list. So sometimes you have to like pick one thing to represent a genre, and sometimes something that might be top 10 worthy might get bumped down to 12th or 14th place because you're trying to fit in representation for the other genres. So keep that in mind, and I'll probably talk about that for some of the things that some of the slots, some of the things I name here. I'll say what might have gone here, this, that, or the other things contending for this slot, you know.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's definitely
and
important.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah. I agree with what you're saying. So.
And another thing I want to point out is that part of how and why you choose these things, especially for a must-watch list like I'm presenting now, kind of the point of it is to be able to talk to people about it. Kind of in general, making these lists. Like one reason to make a list is sort of to like analyze yourself, to reflect on stuff you appreciate and think about why you like one thing more than another. And that's fun and good to do. And we'll probably do a little bit of talking about that. But another thing is, part of the point of this is to make recommendations to people. And so when I consider that, it puts another filter on things. And I realize when I look at my list, I'm not sure how necessarily good I do with this filter. You got to consider your audience. That's part of what I'm saying. So like there are some shows that I might think are really good. They're well made. They're one of my favorites. They're important for, quote unquote, important for everyone to watch. Like I might recommend them to Flint. I might recommend them to, my friend at work. I might recommend them to certain slices of people, but and again, some of these thoughts are left over in my mind from when we talked about movies, but let's say something like Fullmetal Jacket. I don't know if I want to watch that with my mom. Something that's really intense or violent or graphic. Sometimes those might get bumped a little lower on the list than something that's more okay for everyone, like Star Wars or The Princess Bride. I wish I had applied these thoughts better to TV shows because I keep throwing out movies, but hopefully I'm making my point.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll see how that plays out when we talk about TV shows. All right, so you want to start with, who do you want to start with, Eric?
It's going to be Akadi, the sis.
Akadi, okay.
So let me pull this up. Give me a sec. I have to do some technical things really fast. So we're going to look at the list. And the first one that she chose was Batman, the animated series.
Okay.
Which, honestly, I was fine with that one for her. I think that for its time period, it was honestly really good. I mean, she likes it just because, it's a very basic, fun story. Like, if you're a kid, you're just going to enjoy it. But things that people may not know is, I think that was the first animated series that used black paper. So instead of like drawing on white paper, they used dark paper to bring out the darks in that series.
Interesting.
So it like definitely
the default color is black, and they might color it over in blue or red.
Exactly.
Instead of the default color being white, that gets that's interesting. That's I'm not near an expert on anime. I've made an effort to see some of the best stuff out there, but I think you know a lot more about it than I do. So,
and like contenders were like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for her and all that. Like these are actually kids shows. Like meant for kids who are like 10 and under probably. But
Yeah.
Batman the anime series, a lot of people still respect, and it has like Mark Hamill, who was from Star Wars, and I thought he disappeared off the face of the earth, and then when I found out he was the Joker, my mind was blown. You know, and you know,
he's done a lot of other voice acting too.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he knew better, but I think he's done it quite a bit. Yeah.
So you know, the voice acting, especially for a kid show, was really well done. So yeah, it's definitely, I feel like, a good cultural thing from the 90s, you know, kid show wise. So
Can I ask,
yeah.
Does she have any other anime on her list? Is it mostly anime? Is that the only one?
I bet, yes, at least half of it's anime, so we're gonna have to get through that one. But we're gonna bring up, you know, that's what's tricky. You know, anime is, I mean, it's just this whole other genre because they have comedies and dramas and action, and they call it the jump start, basically like Dragon Ball Z, stuff that like goes on for more than 24 episodes or 13 episodes, you know. And you know, it may have been good with 13 episodes or 24, but when they start going further, it makes it a lot harder for a series to become, I feel like, good. You know,
or great anyway.
Or great,
sometimes it goes from being great to only good when it's
exactly
stretched out for too long. Yeah.
There is one show that's on my list that I think breaks that mold, but we'll talk about that when we get to it eventually. I have one or so, you know, animes. Most of mine are going to be actually shows. Anyways, so Sean, you will be next. What is your top 10? And I'm going to try to find it, see if it's on this list.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna bring up. I guess since you started off with an animated one, I'll start off with one too. And I want to clarify again. This is not necessarily in order, but sparked by talking about Batman. I want to say Avatar.
Okay. Avatar is on this
Avatar,
list.
The Last Bender, and especially if I can, you know, maybe I'm cheating a little bit, but I kind of include Airbender and Legend of Korra together. I think of them as one show.
Yes, that is important. I feel like just in general, when we bring up TV shows, we're not going to be like talking about season one, or if there's a spinoff, it may just be one whole thing, you know?
Yeah. I think sometimes maybe you could or should distinguish, but I think it's fair to count Avatar and Korra together. They're such similar styles and, you know, made by the same people and part of the same world and everything. So, if I had to separate them, I would still say Avatar, though. To be clear, I would say Avatar: Last Airbender. I would still include it. I do. You know, we talked about representing different genres, but I also want to make sure my list isn't just 10 shows about old white men. You know what I mean? That's another thing that the industry in general traditionally has been geared toward shows for white people, you know, and so I think it's good that we have a more diverse representation now, and not that Avatar wasn't really, but Korra even adds more to that. But anyway, part of why I picked this is because even though it is sort of geared for kids, I think it's good for everyone. There's a few shows that I have the opinion of, shows and movies, and these get bumped up into my top 10 range that I think if everyone saw them, the world would be better off. And I think this is one of them, you know.
Yeah.
In addition to being, you know, an intriguing story with good animation and kind of like, you know, a certain amount of epicness, and it's got a good mixture of like action and comedy, and it's okay for kids, but it also is good of very important thematic elements, you know, just the idea of like, how do we be a good person, you know, different dilemmas that come along in our lives, how do we deal with them? And I'll also point out that this is high on my personal favorite list because Aang, the central character, you know, I think when you say Batman, everyone just kind of knows, has an idea what Batman's going to be. Probably most of your audience has some idea about Avatar, but just a little setup. The idea is it's in this world where there's this sort of magic. They call it bending, and it's based on elements, fire, water, earth, whatever. And there's nations for each one of them, and there's an avatar who's kind of the leader of them all. And it's sort of a role in the world, like the Dalai Lama, that someone takes on. It's sort of like a supernatural moment, right? They're not like elected. It just is like a thing that comes to them, and the world accepts, and they have to accept and fall into this position. And so it comes to like, I don't know, how old is he? Like 12? You know, like a young boy.
He's really young, yes. Maybe even 10. But I feel like
he just wants... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it is between 10 and 12, but relevant.
he just wants to be a boy. You
Yep.
know, he just wants to play games with his friends. He doesn't want to be like a leader of the world. And there's kind of this, this is all set up from the very beginning. That he gets trapped, if you will. I don't want to get into details, but he gets stuck in a way. He's like preserved, and generations pass with
Mhm.
no avatar, and war breaks out, and then he's released. Still just wanted to be a boy, but suddenly in this role of a leader in a time of war. And why I
Yeah.
personally relate to this, he's a pacifist. He doesn't even eat meat because he doesn't want to hurt an animal.
This is
And
very
he's
similar to
supposed
how
to
I
go to
believe, anyways.
war, you know? So this is a very tough dilemma for him. He can't just ignore his responsibility or this
Right.
war, but he also doesn't want to fight or hurt anyone. So, and that I think is so unique for an anime, right? It's
Yeah.
so unique for a kid show. So often these types of shows are geared towards violence.
Hmm.
Even if it's cartoony, even if it's not bloody, it still is centered around fighting. And this show is centered around avoiding fighting, you know? So
It's true.
I think it's so unique and interesting, and I personally relate to it. And so, like I said, I don't think this is actually 10. This might be like 3 on my list.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
be really hard pressed to put
Mine
it in
is
exact
higher on my
order,
list.
but
It's actually on my list also. So I'll
okay,
just
okay,
might as
yeah.
well just put it here for now, just because you brought it up.
Okay.
But I had it higher on my list also. I want to say like 8 or 7. But it's tricky just because I actually think Avatar is incredible from symbolism, because like even the nations, like wind represents pacifists, like wind literally like it goes through you. The ice nation's stubborn, I think. The fire nation is well, they're pretty much about war, violence
They're a little
almost.
more destructive,
Yeah,
like
destructive, that's the word.
fire. Yeah, yeah.
Earth, actually maybe Earth was the stubborn one and ice was, but anyways, they have clear
Well,
symbolism of
remember, it's
what.
water, which will include ice.
That's
But
true, that's
water maybe
true.
is more fluid or flexible,
That's it. Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
Earth is a little more set and solid. And
yeah. um but yeah, and I think this is like super important. I feel like, for compared to a movie, a TV show has to have characters that you can relate to, has to have basically good character development. Obviously there's lots of pluses when you get like other things, but like, a TV show is geared toward the characters. I feel, you literally build up a character with a whole season or multiple seasons, and they do a very good job with Avatar: The Last Airbender.
let me play devil's advocate a little bit here,
Yeah,
Eric, especially because we're still toward the beginning, and there's a
yeah,
couple of the notes I wanted to make in general about this list, I guess.
yeah,
I in general agree with the point that you're making there.
mhm,
As a default, I agree that
yeah,
you got to have good characters. And in fact, I've even thought about the idea that like a movie, like an hour and a half movie, can get
mhm,
away with being a little more artsy,
yeah,
right? It can like maybe be more about imagery or symbolism and not have set characters or flow between characters. In a real extreme French art house movie, you might see this, but I don't know if you ever saw the movie Slacker. It was
yes. I saw that a long time ago. Don't remember too much about it, but it has Vince. What's his freaking name? The
Well,
main one
there,
of the
there. I
main.
think there's one movie called Slacker and one called Slackers, and there,
Oh, you're
and
right.
and
Never
I
mind. I was
think
thinking of Slackers.
yeah, I might be mixing up a little. I think one is like more skateboarders, and it's a little more standard movie. But the other one, it's Art Linklater, and he's done a lot of movies, and is well respected. And a lot of times he does kind of non-standard movies. And this movie, I think, was his first one, and it didn't really have a main character or a plot. It just like followed characters around. Like it starts off with like someone's on a bus, and they might like talk to the person next to them on a bus, and they get
Mhm.
off the bus and get in a cab, and when a cab drops him off, you expect to go in the house with this person we've been introduced to, but instead it follows the cab driver, and they pick up someone else, and that person gets dropped off, and they go in, they call someone on the phone. When they hang up, then we go to the person on the other side of the phone, and they go to a bar, and like it never comes back to any character. It has no real plot. It's just going through moments in people's lives that are loosely connected. And it still made me think about a lot of stuff. It's still like at first I was frustrated. I was like, "What the heck is this movie about? I don't understand this." But eventually I was like, this is making me think. Like every scene was an interesting conversation or
Mhm.
interesting little
Mhm.
visual moment. And take this to TV, I realized the same thing. I kind of made a decision to kind of help me narrow down to top 10,
Yeah.
to leave certain things off, like Planet Earth, there's no characters in documentary shows, like, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
there, and those are like a lot of very good, important, popular TV
yeah.
shows,
Hmm.
a lot of National Geographic documentaries, even news shows. Like, I don't know, like they're like, important shows that everyone's aware of, like, I
Like
don't know,
2020.
2020 or
Yeah.
something like that. But there's no characters in that really. So in general, I agree, and I think both of us, our list, we're just gonna have like plot-oriented,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
character-driven drama, maybe But it is worth noting, good, important, popular, favorite TV shows can be very outside of that.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
if I can push this a little bit
Yeah.
more, for example, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, those are parts of culture. Those are entertaining. They've been around for generations.
But
Maybe the hosts are characters, I guess. I don't know, but
I think another factor too is at least with a game show, and you bring up a good point. That's very competitive, and people like competitiveness.
yep.
I mean, I do. So and it's fun seeing also like the underdog potentially. Someone who because like they're just ordinary people on like Jeopardy or something like that. Obviously there's a certain set skill, even though some shows are not. But you want them to win. You hope that they could win.
Yeah.
To better their lives, but because they get lots of money or something like that. But anyways, it's fun.
As long as we're on this topic, let me bring up another one. Another show that if I was listening, my favorite would make the list. And I almost feel like should make this list here. But again, trying to narrow it down to top 10, I just decided to include standard plot-oriented
Yeah.
shows. But Survivor and all kinds of reality TV, right?
Yeah.
Those definitely have characters. And Survivor and Big Brother,
Mhm.
what they have competition, which adds an element to it, even if it might change season to season. But that is definitely a slice of TV that I would fully understand if someone wanted to include on their must-see list or their favorite list or even their best-made list. Like even Survivor has really good cinematography. There's definitely some great film work and editing involved in those shows. So
Yeah.
I will at least want to take a moment to give some credit to these shows
Yes,
and these
yes.
slices of shows.
Quick note, Chroma the Sage just said, plus with game shows, you could try to play along with the contestants. So
Yeah, it could
Which is true.
be interactive in a way. Yeah.
actually, Chroma is someone I did a stream with. I've done clouds with Chroma a couple of times, and we actually did a game show host. And I was doing really bad, and I won at the end. So yeah, no, game shows are fun. But yeah, okay. So going back to the Avatar: The Last Airbender, that was not necessarily our 10, but it is on the list because we brought up animated.
Yeah.
It did very well.
I want to point out we're probably about 30 minutes in if we've named one show each. So
oh yeah, we're going for a while.
We did a lot of preface. We'll go through it faster after this, but
another factor too is Avatar: The Last Airbender versus this is comparing Batman the animated series. Batman is a single lone episode. You can watch any episode in any order, pretty much, and you'll understand it has a beginning, middle, and end in an episode. Well, Avatar: The Last Airbender, even though it does have a beginning, middle, and end in each episode, it is a continuous story that goes throughout the whole series, and I personally like that more. That's just a personal thing, but like Seinfeld is, you could just watch a single episode and understand what the heck's going on, and it's really freaking funny. But I tend to like shows that continue from episode to episode and build basically a world, a story world or plot or whatever you want to call it. So
as long as you're bringing this up, I'm going to point out that I think that's a big difference in modern TV.
Mhm.
And one show that didn't quite make the cut for me, but I want to bring up The Sopranos, I think is part of that shift. It's partly the nature of modern technology, how TV is presented to us also. In the past, for the first, I don't know, like more than half of the existence of TV, 50 or 70 or whatever years, 80 years maybe, you had to be home at 8 o'clock on Wednesday or whatever to see a show.
That is true.
And so the people writing a show couldn't just assume you've seen every episode up to this. You couldn't like DVR it or binge it on Netflix. Those things didn't exist. And also they were depending on advertisers to put commercials on there. And so they needed to appeal to a mass audience. They were trying to get as many people to watch a show as possible. So they couldn't let people feel left out. They missed a couple episodes, So back then there's a term for this. It's called blue skies TV. The idea that it's just kind of open-ended and never-ending.
Right.
And at any episode, the show's just going to keep going on indefinitely. That they're not going to like finish up a plot line, or the show won't end, other than because advertisers don't want to pay it anymore, maybe because there's not broad enough audience anymore or whatever. But nowadays, a streaming service can have like a dozen different shows that appeal to a dozen different audiences. They can watch it anytime they want. They don't need to have a huge audience for one show. So they can appeal to more different niche audiences. They can be R rated and still, you don't have to worry, on 8 o'clock on Wednesday on NBC, you can't have The Sopranos or something, So,
Yeah.
so I think The Sopranos was one of the first big shows. It was a huge success. It demonstrated a big production with its episodes were connected to each other, that you kind of did need to see stuff leading through it to get the full value, was viable, and HBO was willing to produce that, and
Mhm.
it was successful. It kind of like that, combined with the coming technology of Netflix and the like, kind of created what we have in TV nowadays, which is just, I think, better. You have this vision. They're basically making like, you know 10-hour stories that get chopped up into little bits,
Yeah.
rather than 30-minute stories that can only go so far.
Exactly. Chroma said, I'm not sure what type of list you're making, but I vote for MYPD Blue. I'm not sure if I've seen that personally. I know I've heard
We
of it.
should, as new people come in, I'll go and clarify
Yeah.
that I'm specifically making a must-watch list, and we talked a little bit about the beginning, about the difference between like
Mhm.
my favorite versus the best versus must-watch, and we also talked about the idea that we kind of want to hit different
Genres.
genres, if you will, through the list. We don't want to name like 8 different crime dramas. So,
Unless you're Akadi, then she's going to just name all her favorites probably. But anyways. But no, you're right. So the next one is not on the tier list, but this is Akadi's, because since I picked Airbender with you, she brings up American Idol, which is, we hit this already, the reality TV shows.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is probably one of the biggest. Now, actually, I think Survivor is bigger. When I actually looked at a list about this, and Survivor, pretty much, there's a show that beats Survivor, and I've never heard of it, but obviously Survivor, I think, is very well done. So basically, big series like American Idol and Survivor, since they could dive into the characters, they could like do other things that reality TV shows, lower ones, can't do. Like cinematography and editing and all that. Which I think that's just really neat. Like because it is a different type of genre. Reality TV. I personally don't like it that much, but like I still find myself watching stuff once in a while.
Yeah, I'm really glad you hit American Idol, because like I said, I didn't quite find space in my list. I just kind of made a decision to not include documentaries, news,
Mhm.
nature shows, game shows, things that are part of TV. I decided, just because I was having a hard time narrowing it down, just to focus on plot-driven, character-driven shows. But if I were gonna put reality, I would have put Survivor. I think Survivor at its height was bigger than any other reality show has been, but different ones have come and gone.
That's
Survivor
true.
gets
That's true.
credit, I think, for pioneering. Like,
Mhm.
reality TV was coming about on MTV and in other ways, but Survivor really brought it to the forefront and inspired a bunch of other shows, and is still around. I think it gets a lot of credit.
Yeah. No.
But American Idol is reasonable too.
Yeah. And of course, if you like singing, they have incredible talent. It's pretty much like a spelling bee with songs.
That's a good way to put it.
So for your number 9, what would it be? Let's see if it's on
Okay, so another thing I talked about that maybe is another comparison to make, or contrast to make, with American Idol and Survivor, is the idea that for must see, I think you need to appeal to a pretty broad base of people. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a bunch of like dark R-rated violent stuff. I don't think you want to have all kid shows either, but you need a balance. And
Yeah.
I want to point that out, because this one I'm about to bring up is not exactly recommendable to everyone. And I also question whether or not I should put it on the list, because there's so little material to it. It's a show called Fleabag. And it's 2 seasons, but the seasons are only 6 episodes each. It's only 12 half-hour episodes altogether. And it's definitely R-rated, but it is one of the best one of the most acclaimed shows out there. Like I think if you like do any kind of research online, like
Mhm.
top 10 TV shows, you'll see it pop up on almost everyone's list.
And
And it's also it's
didn't the director win 2 things at once that year?
yeah,
Like,
Phoebe Waller-Bridges, she just kind of exploded onto the scene, and Fleabag was like the main thing. But I think in the same 2 or 3 year period, she had another show called Crashing, which
mhm.
don't get confused because there's 2 shows called Crashing that also came out about the same time. And she was also the voice of one of the Star Wars droids, and yeah, I mean she just swept. I think the Golden Globes and the Emmys, like just the whole world was like, holy crap, this is just the best show out right now, and especially for like how short it was and how much it packed in. Basically, it's just a British woman trying to make her way through life. I don't want to get into it too much. It's not particularly plot driven, so it's not a lot to spoil. But I do feel I should warn you. It starts off kind of comedic. It gets pretty serious. It might bring you to tears, and it makes some really good analysis on family and relationships and romance and
Isn't there
and
like
I
a
don't know,
Lewis
even issues of
Black?
sexism and all kinds of stuff. What?
Isn't there like a Lewis Black that's similar style? I could be saying the comedian or it,
Lewis. I
I
don't
may
think
say the
this
wrong
is anything
comedian.
like Lewis Black.
Yeah, no, I
Lewis
think
Black is like a loud, angry
no,
comedian. But
okay,
I don't.
wrong person. It's a different guy. It's like he's balding a
I
little
think of
bit.
Louis C.K.
That's
Maybe.
it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess her show could be compared to Louis C.K. And Louis C.K. he had a great show, but I feel like he did a lot of bad stuff in real life that's enough that I don't want to prop him up.
Okay,
So I'm
that
not
makes sense.
listing his show. But
But it's like a comparison. But this Fleabag delivered better.
yeah. And it's a little bit different of a tone too. It's a little bit more dynamic and use a little bit more elements of filmmaking that's a little more clever, like with the editing. She
Hmm?
does a lot of breaking the fourth wall, like she's gonna have a conversation with someone but like turn and talk to you, and they even play with that in the second season. Anyway, especially for how short it is, I highly recommend it.
How many
I also want to
episodes?
throw out 12. Like I said,
Oh,
it's
12, 12,
it's
yeah.
2 seasons of 6 episodes each.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm glad you did ask that though, because I was about to clarify another factor. I said earlier, part of the reason to make a list like this is to recommend it to somebody,
Yes.
right? But it's really hard to recommend, even as much as I might love Game of Thrones or whatever given show. But when it's 7 or 8 seasons of 10 or 12 episodes and an hour long each, it's hard to say, hey, you should spend 100 hours of your life watching this TV show. Like, no matter how good it is, it's really hard for someone to take that on. And
Yes.
maybe, hopefully, eventually they will, and it'll probably be worth it once they do, but it's difficult. Fleabag is not. You could easily do that in like a week. You know what I mean? Like maybe 2 whole weeks, but for how good it is and how short it is, I highly recommend it. But I will point out that it's definitely R rated, and because it's so short, I almost wasn't sure if it was worthy of making the list because I didn't know if it had gone on long enough to earn it, if you will.
Yeah.
But that's how good it is. I put it on the list anyway, and I realized, kind of doing some research for this
Mm.
little list that we're presenting
Yeah.
here, I just realized how acclaimed it was, and it made me think, for the sake of being must watch, it's higher up than I might normally give it credit for.
Right. So for my number 9, I put 24. Now 24 has a lot of seasons. There are a few that were exceptional. The first season being one of them. I remember someone talking about this, because I'm into film, and I mean, it's pretty much like someone chasing the main character. I think they use a lot of like not like still shots, but like someone's like following them, like it's like a news show almost. And they mess around with the fact that it's all set in 24 hours, like literally, like each episode is from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And when they hit the sundowns, like when sun goes down, at 6, the sun goes down in the TV show and it rises up at 6 a.m. Stuff like that. I freaking love that. There's like they do this in superheroes where there's like you have 10 seconds and then like they hit it when it's like 1 second. Well, you see the plot, going, and eventually, like there's like tense moments like that. Except you don't have to worry. Like you understand what's going on versus like I feel like stuff like that where it's like ridiculous when they like hit it at 1 second. I've always been annoyed with that, like on like superhero stuff, but I feel like they present it a lot better in 24. Tension situations like that.
I agree. Like buzzer beater moments like that are a
Yeah,
little bit cheap. Like if that's the only way that you can create suspense and intensity, then you're failing somewhere else. You know what I
exactly,
mean?
exactly.
Maybe you do it once,
Yeah, yeah, it's
but
fine
if
maybe
it's a
once.
consistent thing, yeah. And I agree. I wasn't a particular fan of 24. I thought that it was a little bit more action oriented than I tend to like. I
Mhm.
tend to like more drama or comedy than action, and I think sometimes it was a little unbelievable over the top. But I'm nitpicking some plot points. I
Yeah.
still think it was like it definitely like captured the audience for it was like a big moment in TV for a minute there,
Mhm.
and it was a unique way to present TV. It was a really good idea, and as you point out,
Mhm.
I never even thought about what a filmmaking challenge it must have been
Yes.
to the process of filming and editing it to get the time of day and everything pieced together. Like I even am a little more forgiving of some of my nitpicks at the plot elements
Yeah.
because I realize how tricky it would have been to put it all together. So
I remember some people pointing out, like, because I think one of them's in like LA, or maybe the first scene's in LA. That traffic, there's no way you can get from point A to point B in a certain amount of time. But they
yeah.
still made an effort to have some time, like, may take like 20 minutes on screen time to get from point A to point B. So it's not like they immediately warped over there. I remember one of the presidents of the United States was flying from Washington D.C. to somewhere in the West. It took him like 3 episodes.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
kept
and it
like
makes
they'll
sense
cut
that it
back to it.
would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, stuff like that. I don't know. That's just awesome to me. Like the attention to detail, at least to a degree. Maybe it's a little unrealistic, but they at least try to make an effort. So, um, but yeah, and I'm huge into action, and it's like a huge action, pumping thing for me. So, and Keith Sutherland does it incredible. Like Keith Sutherland, I felt like didn't have anything massive for a while, and then he hit that. He was like one of
Yeah,
the
it was
first.
definitely rejuvenated his career, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Like some people who are like A-tier stars, kind of like disappear, and it was nice to see somebody like that, like who was a really good actor, hit a TV show. Because I feel like big
I'm
actors
not so
didn't.
sure he was A tier in the first place,
He
but
may, yeah, I debated about that, but he was still pretty. I mean, his father is pretty big, Donald.
yeah, yeah.
But it was nice seeing like an actor basically in Hollywood at TV shows, because I feel like that didn't happen as much back then, unless you're a guest star.
That is something else, as we were saying before, has been a shift in TV and film, where big name actors and directors are starting to put effort into
Mm-hmm.
TV, and
Yes.
I think partly because they have a chance to develop more intricate, complicated, layered stories and characters, and audiences are more tuned into it. So it's definitely a difference in the industry. I don't know. I want to give it around 2000 when the change started to
I think
happen. It's
about
like
that, and that's
clear
when
at this
24
point,
came out,
but
and Sopranos, I think, was
Sopranos,
somewhere
yeah,
around there.
yeah, yeah.
Because I know it was before Game of Thrones and Walking Dead and all them. So Sopranos. I remember seeing that at Blockbuster when Blockbusters were around. um. All right, so we're going to go on to number 8. This is not going to be on the list. This is an anime. I don't even know if you've heard of this. I don't even know why you put this on there, Akadi. But Golden Boy. I don't even think she understands what that series is.
Golden Boy.
The
That's an
Golden
anime.
Boy.
I know that one, right?
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's 6 episodes. It's really, really short, made in the 90s, about a kid who's living. She laughs, Grandma. But it's about a person, or a guy who's like in his mid-20s, who got out of college, and he's trying to pursue new things. And in each episode, he like just learns a new craft. Whether it's riding a bicycle better or learning how to cook. But how they present it is ridiculous. Like, it is so over the top and funny, and it's very perverted too. That it's almost like not recommended for. Well, don't show a kid this, because I mean, it's pretty much it's not. What would they call it? I was gonna say it's not hentai, but it's pretty close sometimes, with the nudity and all that. But overall, it is one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and it is obviously one of the funniest things she's ever seen, even if she doesn't understand the context of it. So, oh no, what's this? Stop it. Something. Let's see. just an average Joe guy trying to be nothing else. That's what Chrome was saying. So yeah, that is Akadi's. What is your 8, Sean?
Well, I think at this point I'm going to throw out Lost because it's been circling around some of the other conversations we've had. I think that it was in that same early 2000s time period when TV was taking a shift.
Okay.
Um, it was also, for a couple years there, I feel like everyone was watching it. It was a huge part of culture. It was definitely a show where you had to have, every episode was like ending on cliffhangers, and they were developing long-term mysteries, and it got you to be there Thursday night at 8 o'clock, or I don't remember what time it came on now, but people were scheduling their lives around it. It was prompting so much conversation at work the next day, the next week. It was also in a time when like the internet was a little new and people were going online to talk about theories, and it was I think part of the shift in TV. And I also think that it was in addition to, like, I don't know, cultural impact, it was really good. I really liked the show, and it was really well designed. I think that the idea, and another thing that I think we've seen spread into TV in general, another technique of filmmaking, of television making. And I think Oz, that the prison show, I think it was another HBO show, was doing something similar, but that show didn't really hit big like Lost did. But the idea that you have this group of characters who are in it together, if you will, right? So we have this sort of big plot that we're following everyone in, but each episode you take one character and focus on them. You get their backstory, flashbacks. You learn more about their personality, their motivations, their history. And then once you've seen 5 or 7 episodes, suddenly each episode is so much more meaningful because you know so much more about each character. It took a while to build that up for all of them, but once you get there, the show is so much richer than any other show. Like, maybe at that time, maybe any other show. I think it was
No, I think you're
one
right.
of the best shows ever, top 5 at least at the time, when it was in season 3, 4, or whatever.
And I don't want to bash main channels, but that was on like Fox or something, right? At the time, or
it was CBS.
Yeah,
it was definitely a main network. Yeah,
and a lot of main networks don't come out with, unfortunately, great stuff. But
usually
obviously,
it's not dramas anyway. 24 was, they.
That is true. That is true. But
they used to more than they do now, I think, because now Netflix and HBO, they're the ones that are
and
able
AMC
to do it better. But AMC. Yeah.
But no, you're right. Even
FX credit.
I was gonna
FX
say
has, I think,
FX.
2 or 3 shows on my list. Yeah.
So Sage points out, throwing out Metropolitan. Have you ever seen Metropolitan? Oh, I'm sorry, Metropolis.
Metropolis.
Oh, maybe that's how you pronounce
show?
it.
I haven't even heard of it, so.
But it's
it might be good,
impact.
but I doubt it's must watch if I haven't even heard of it.
Is it, Chroma? Is that an animated, or was that like a TV show? Because I'm like thinking of an anime or like a movie when I think of that name, but I don't know if that's it. While she gets back to us, you can continue. Sorry.
I based on that comment I just now made, I wanted to point out another thing, that a must-watch list for a sci-fi fan might be different than a must-watch list for a crime fan. Might be different for a must-watch list for me or for you. So mine is, I'm trying to make this sort of generic, and so I can imagine a lot of your audience might have multiple anime on their must-watch list, where I'm going to have maybe one. So
right.
You know what? I want to backtrack a little bit too, because the other show that I was like, that I really wanted to include, but Avatar kind of got that spot, was Cowboy Bebop. I think that show was sort of a pioneer in anime, and I really love it. I love the sort of the cinematic presentation and the style of it all, and and it was, probably when you go farther back, a little bit more renowned. I can't think if that's the word I want to use, but I love it. I would love for someone to have it in their top 10. I think anyone who wants to say this, that, or the other anime is the best, they know they got to explain why it's better than Cowboy Bebop. I think most people will agree it's sort of like a top must-watch, whatever.
Definitely a cultural.
But it didn't quite make my overall top 10 list.
So Chroma
said, it might be like 11.
That Metropolis was originally a black and white movie by Fritz Lang, then Azumi. So this was basically it was made into an anime. I guess it was inspired by it, and they're both amazing.
What was inspired by it?
I think the black and white was the animated one was inspired by the black and white one. If I'm correct. I see. Maybe they're two completely different things, but it sounds like it. Oh wait, yeah, an anime of it. And she says, "Sorry, didn't realize this was just TV shows," but that's fine because we actually did a movie segment a couple weeks back.
Yeah, we did this same format for movies a couple weeks ago, and I in that one we talked about like same thing, like having different spot. I want to have a spot on my list for like a classic movie, if you will, and I think I chose Casablanca. I could see someone choosing Metropolis, but
yeah, no, I
wouldn't pick that one.
I definitely heard it. I never saw it, but it did seem like it was kind of like Miyazaki, like very cultural impacted.
Yeah.
Especially for animators.
But I think when you go back far enough, they might have great themes, and for their time might have been really good, and they might have been very pioneering, but they're just not as good as things that they inspired. When you go forward a little bit farther, there's just better pacing, better editing, better film quality. I just think they get outclassed. Those super old, pre-1950 movies start to get outclassed by modern stuff.
Right.
If you were in a film history class, you should watch Metropolis. If you've already seen all the other top X whatever movies, you'll get to Metropolis and you'll appreciate it. But that doesn't make my top 10.
All right. So for me, and this is actually something that, let me go back to this, that Sean brought up, because I never, well, wait, I want to go back to Lost really fast. Lost, I freaking loved it, but I didn't see it when it was at its prime, like when basically it was being aired live. I watched it like, I want to say a decade later, at least like 5 years later. But I love the idea of how you're talking about this, that they focus on one character. Basically, there was no main characters. You could argue there was a main character in that show. I think it was Jack, but pretty much everyone was equal, and I thought that was just a bold move, and it was awesome. Especially for its time.
I think that if you had to pick a main character, it would probably be Jack. But he's barely the main character over Locke and Kate and several others. And through the course of it, characters died. That was another thing.
I was about to pick. They didn't care about
or worried about what was going to happen in these actiony moments. We like something like 24. You never think Kiefer Sutherland's going to die. Right?
That is absolutely true.
A time, no matter how bad or dire or scary or dangerous it gets, there's no chance he's going to die. But in Lost, oh crap, after a few episodes in, after the second season especially, you're like, anyone might die. I'm not so sure. Just because you're a main character means you're going to live. Yeah.
So that was another thing I appreciate about 24 is, yes, you're right. Kiefer Sutherland was pretty much invincible. But, I mean, just because they focused so much on him. But the side characters really made that show. And there was a lot of side characters. Like, some of them you're like, are they going to... Like, there's one, not spoiling it, but there was like a character in the first season that I thought it was like just a cliche character. Like, this is what this character is going to be like. And they winded up being an amazing character throughout the whole series. And not what I expected. Stuff like that. I don't know. I always appreciate side characters a lot.
To be clear, I didn't mean that to be a knock on 24.
Oh, I know that.
Because that's true. So many shows, even other shows I really like The Sopranos or whatever. So
yeah. No, I was actually pointing that out.
You don't expect main characters to die.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, in a way, can take away from it because the full suspense isn't there.
Absolutely.
And they can make up for it by making you worried about how the relationship with their child might be messed up rather than they're going to die, right? There are other things you can worry about whether someone lives or dies. That's not the only thing that makes something, interesting or intriguing or whatever. But but it is extra suspenseful or exciting or whatever when life really is on the line, which it wasn't Lost.
So. Yes. All right. So my top 8 just kind of got mixed around because of Avatar, but was Firefly, and this is something you recommended. And now the unfortunate thing about Firefly was, and everyone who's seen it knows, is it doesn't end exactly. Like they they had a production issue and they had to cancel the show. But the episodes that were shown were fantastic. It was really, really well done. And it's like a sci-fi, slash Western. Now they do end it with a movie, pointed out, Serenity. At least somewhat ended. But, I'm talking about the show, and I think the shows was a surprising, especially for it being hyped for me. I felt like they're like, it's really, 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 really good. I'm like, this better be really good. And it was, and it was. Yeah. So,
yeah, I think that Firefly is by the way, I wish I knew a little better, but I guarantee you the people working on Firefly were inspired by Cowboy Bebop. Think how similar those two shows are. Right?
I actually did get very similar vibes. It's a futuristic show, like you go in space, but every time you go onto a planet, it's just, it's like this Western feel. Yeah. Like, you don't have like these massive skyscrapers. Not saying that there can't be in those shows, but overall they focus more on, the problem planets,
Yeah. Newly developed, which is kind of what the old west, the Wild West was.
Mm-hmm.
It was civilization moving into the wilderness, and it hadn't been built up. There wasn't all the full infrastructure and support and community and law that there would, and so sometimes that makes for more adventure, and it makes sense that when we go out and colonize other planets, that there's going to be, I don't know if it's necessarily completely realistic the way, I don't know, Cowboy Bebop or Firefly presents it, but they're not going to be immediately fully developed civilizations on these other planets. There's going to be, it might be a little less likely for criminals to get out there. Maybe it'd be more likely for criminals to get out there. I don't know. I think you could think of how it might play out. This didn't make my list, but well, actually, let me think a second. I was going to say something else about Firefly.
So
the movie.
I know.
Go ahead. Let me get
I know one of the things that stood out for me, Firefly, was how the dialogue was. I thought the dialogue was, honestly, it was just really, really well written. Like you cared about the characters pretty fast. Each of the characters were defined very, very well or well developed. And, that was like part of why I think I really grasped it, immediately. So, anyway. What were we gonna say?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I wanted to say, if you haven't seen Firefly or if you're not familiar with it out there, it's almost like Han Solo, the TV show. It's this guy who's got a ship and a crew who's trying to stay under the law, and he's kind of like snarky and quick, and it runs into troubles, and it's a good mix of sci-fi, action, comedy, drama, Western, and I want to agree with Eric that a big draw was the witty dialogue between the characters. It's something I found I appreciate in general in comedies, is sort of like rapid fire back and forth dialogue, which I'm going to take a moment to also like reflect on some other shows that are worth considering but didn't quite make the list. And a difference in modern and old TV is it up until around 2000, TV shows, comedies especially, it was just standard to have a laugh track. And for example, I Love Lucy and MASH. Those are other shows that I think would be very worthy of a top 10 must-see list. They didn't quite make my list, but I think those are like classic shows you should at least be familiar with, that are good at least, But they had laugh tracks. And Seinfeld, Friends, they all had laugh tracks. And one thing that a laugh track, one thing about a laugh track is it maybe insults the audience a little bit. Like, you don't get the joke, you don't need to tell me when to laugh. There might be a little bit of, maybe it makes it more okay to laugh. I don't know. Like, generally speaking, I think you could see TV as abandoned laugh tracks. But one reason for that is because it makes it hard to have rapid fire dialogue. It makes it hard to have a series of quick jokes in a row because you have to wait a second for the laugh track. You can't and it's not natural for real conversation either. So I think, and that's something I think that Firefly, it's not a comedy that would have a laugh track anyway, but the comedic elements are made better because of the natural dialogue that they have with witty characters. You get this back and forth series of one-liners that are hilarious, that are also progressing the characters and the plot. So,
also, on TV shows like I Love Lucy and Seinfeld, sometimes you could just film it live. I'm not saying they did film it live, but like, basically they didn't have music. Like it was hard to implement music. Well, Firefly, they can. And obviously modern shows, and music has a huge impact on how you feel, whether it's laughing or not. I mean, you could go from like a funny thing to silence, and get a certain reaction, and then go back to music,
Yeah. That was one reason laugh tracks came about, because they did start off filming in front of live audiences.
Mhm.
And as they peeled that away, because that created extra production challenges, they wanted to still have the laughs that the audiences gave, so they just recorded them. There's a whole thing to it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's gone.
All right. So that was.
Can I also, real quick,
Yeah.
I want to say that sci-fi is like a slot to hit, and you're hitting it here with Firefly.
Mhm.
And I have one on my list that I'm not going to name yet, but I want to name another one that didn't quite make my list that I
Yeah.
think is worth mentioning, is The Expanse. That's another show, if you haven't
Yes,
heard of it.
I have
Really
not
good
seen it.
sci-fi.
I've heard of it. As I was described, it was made by the people who did D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons or a role play type of thing with George R. Martin. I actually don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard.
It is. That's
Okay.
exactly true. Yeah. He has a group of friends that are all writers that have known each other for years, that play role-playing games together. And a few members of that group, I think 3 of them primarily,
Hmm.
wrote this series of books based on characters and world they had developed in role playing. And the setup is that it's in a not so far future. We've colonized Mars, and we're like mining out the asteroid belts, and there is sort of this conflict growing between people that are out there. At this point, it's been like a couple generations, like people being born on mines of asteroid belts, that live their lives doing this tough, dangerous work in this unique environment, and the resources go back to Earth. And these people are like, hey, we should be our own people. We shouldn't be, you don't own us. You don't own this asteroid. We should have more control here. And so this conflict is brewing. And then they throw in some sci-fi elements, and you have characters kind of like Game of Thrones. There's like a Martian soldier is one character, and there's the captain of a transport ship is another character, and then like a member of the UN on Earth is. So you get these different perspectives, and it's really good, really well fleshed out, and it doesn't have the comedic elements of Firefly. It's a little bit more serious drama, sci-fi. But
so we're going to go into our number 7. Number 7. For Akadi, that is Rumbling Hearts. This is an anime. This is an older anime. I think it was either late 90s or early 2000s.
Say the name again?
Rumbling Hearts. So this is a short series, just like 13 episodes. And it was about a group of high school kids. 2 of them get into a romantic relationship, and then something really, really bad happens. And then they fast forward to like, I don't know, 5 years later, and you have to deal with this conflict that happened earlier on. And it's a romance, but it's like a really tough romance to watch. Like I was like shocked. I was like, this feels like a movie, how they present it. I can see why she put it on there, because she loves romances, and they ask like hard questions about relationships in the series. So yeah, Rumbling Hearts.
All right. Let's see. That's 7.
That's 7. Yes.
You and I haven't said our 7s, right?
Correct. So you are next.
All right. Let's see. For my 7, I'm going to name a show. I tried to avoid this. I wanted to name shows that have stood the test of time at least a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have one show that just ended and one show that's still airing. And I'm going to name the show that's still airing right now.
Okay.
Atlanta.
Let me find this.
Atlanta is Donald Glover. You might know Donald Glover. He's a comedian and a musician. And he was one of the characters in Community, which is another noteworthy show. A lot of people
it's not
really
on
love.
this list. Oh, sorry. It's not on the list, surprisingly.
Atlanta's not?
Yeah, I'm actually shocked. I bet it's big enough that I would think it would. Anyways, you can continue.
Its 3rd season is currently airing. It got disrupted. It's already been like slow to be released because Donald Glover's doing so many things. Like he still has albums coming out, and he was in a Star Wars movie, and he's making his TV show. And then COVID also hit. But I'm okay with him taking his time and doing it right. And
all right. Goodbye, Chroma. Chroma's having to leave. Anyways.
Okay. The crux of it is that there's an up-and-coming rapper in Atlanta, and he has a cousin that's kind of fumbling through life that wants to be his manager. and he's got a girlfriend and a buddy, and it's his parents. It's just these different characters in his world, and it's sort of a slice of life show, just basically showing what it's like for uh, a young black man
Mhm.
struggling to get by, moving into the music scene. And it's such a good show because it's, for a lot of reasons. One, it's kind of non-standard. It's not really plot centered. You At the end of one episode, the next one doesn't necessarily pick up explaining what happened from last time.
Mhm.
It's just different moments in life, and it's loosely connected to the course of it. But sometimes they have like completely offshoot episodes that focus on like a different character for any of the main
Oh,
characters.
that's cool.
Or like there's one episode where Paperboy is the rapper, and there's one episode where the whole episode is just like a news show where he's a special guest. And so it's just him answering questions to an interview and different news stories that come on. They even have like made up commercials for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's an animated episode. It does all kinds of like very unique, thought provoking, odd things in this show. And more than anything else, it just makes me think a lot. Just like a lot of times, sometimes it might make me uncomfortable, or I might even
Mhm.
disagree or be frustrated. But I'm always intrigued, and I'm always thinking about it, and I appreciate the filmmaking aspects, the interesting takes. I think, especially as time passes, this show is going to be thought more and more of.
Mhm.
It's not real flashy. It doesn't have a It's not marketed real big. I don't expect it to ever be like a huge, sweeping, popular show. But as time passes and more people see it, I think it's going to creep up on everyone's list and start being on a lot of top tens.
That's awesome. I remember you talking to me about it. So,
I
as
also
for-
like it a little extra being from Atlanta. So
yeah. Fun fact: the person I interviewed, DeJour Ashwood, who was in my film, he had like a small part in Atlanta. Or
I think I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like he's like some side character, but still, you got to see the cast, and work with them. I thought that was just awesome.
Yeah. I have a
Um,
friend who is the I can't think what to call it, the set scout. He would like find spots around Atlanta where they were going to film different things. Yeah.
right, right. All right. So my 7 is give me one sec. Boop, boop, boop. Let's see, pull my list. Is This Is Us. This is actually still airing. This is on its final season. Actually, there's a couple of stuff that's on a final season right now, in general. But This Is Us is just about how to deal with family situations, whether you're from a different ethnic family, or it's like kind of set in like the 1970s to now. It jumps around in time. But I think they do a really, really good job on how they develop each of these characters in the show. And it's just like a good family show, asking, I mean, similar to Rumbling Heart, I guess, but like this is just an actual show. It asks like hard questions. How do you deal with certain situations in families or life, or be a good father or mother, or I don't know. It's just a really good show. I really, really do like it, and I think they're wrapping up the season really, really well. There's obviously like questions that needed to be answered, and they do a lot of surprising things in the show. How they tell the story, which I appreciate too. I know the main characters from Heroes originally, which Heroes is not on my list, but I know the first Heroes was really big for its time, and I liked it. I did like Heroes. The season 1. Um,
Season one was good, but as a show, it is not worthy of top 10. I don't think it's
exactly.
worthy of
That's what I
top
was gonna say.
15.
But
Yeah.
but the one of the main characters in that show was in this. He's like one of the big characters in this. Milo, I think his name is. But anyways,
I don't remember who that is.
yeah, he's like there's 2 brothers in Heroes, and he was one of the brothers. Like one could fly, and the other one, actually, I don't remember what the other one's ability was.
I kind of do remember that now that you said, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways,
Yeah, I'm familiar with This Is Us. I think I watched the first episode. My family really loves the show,
Mhm.
and it's on my list of stuff to see, if you will.
Mhm.
But one thing I guess there's a couple things that's held me back. Is it I got the idea that it's really tough. It has a lot of tragedy,
Yes,
and
yes, it
it's
does. That's why I
I've
say
found in
tough.
recent years I've been seeking out more comedy than tragedy. Um, and and then the other thing, I kind of got this vibe, and I feel I don't be too negative about one of
Yeah.
your picks, but I was getting feedback, I guess. It's getting this vibe that it had maybe gone downhill. That it was like went from one of the best shows on TV to kind of an okay show. I don't know if you feel
I
the
guess you
same
could
way,
argue
but
that a little bit. I mean, it's, like some of the stuff they do earlier on may not be as impactful. I guess it depends on Um, but I still think it's good. Um, but that's tricky with TV series in general. I mean, there's going to be one on my list that was one of the best shows probably of all time, and it didn't get received at the end at all. You know what
yeah,
I'm talking about.
yeah.
You know,
Lost did not end well. A lot of
yeah,
people
yeah,
were
I've heard
frustrated
that.
with that. So yeah,
Like it was
I
supposed to have.
think that if you have like 5 really spectacular seasons and 1 bad season, you could still be in a top 10 list.
Yeah,
But if you have 1 really good season and 5 okay seasons, I don't know if that's enough. That's not enough.
right.
That's another real quick. Well, I
Yeah.
don't want to cut you off if you have more to say about This Is Us.
Oh no, no, no. I think it's an interesting subject matter we're about to
Yeah.
talk about. So
Excuse me. I just wanted to say that one thing about another element of lists like this is it there are a lot of really good shows. You know what I
hmm
mean? Like, not even accounting for people's differences in opinion, because someone who's like a big fan of fantasy, their top 10 is going to look different than someone who's a big fan of crime dramas, right? But even if you're, even accounting for that, even among like crime dramas, if you were to look at my top 10 crime dramas, if you like remove that list and look at my like 11 to 20 crime dramas, I don't think anyone would look at that list and be like, these shows suck. Everyone would be like, yeah, that's a really good list, because
hmm
there's just so many. The difference between the best and the 10th best is not that big. It's like the best one is a 9.5, and the 10th best one is a 9.3, and the 20th best one is an 8.8. They're all still really good. So
yeah,
somehow you got to find some reason to kick some out and keep some in. And that's going to maybe come down to personal opinion or whatever, but
yeah. Another factor is, I mean, this shows that are current just in general that are having, a final season or still just running. This Is Us, since it's been running, got hit with COVID. They had to deal with that. And I
yeah,
think they're
yeah.
still pumping out an episode every year. And I'm wondering if the quality was lessened a little bit because of that issue. It's like something that's outside of their issue or just issue the outside of their control.
An external impact on a show. Like, that's something that happened in Lost, is there were a couple characters that got arrested. I think they got arrested like multiple times for DUIs, and
Ooh.
eventually they're like, okay, you're off the show. Like,
Yeah.
so they had to write those characters out, and it disrupted things. The writer strike happened in the middle of Lost too. Yeah,
Yes, that was a big thing back in the early 2000s. Yeah. I mean, obviously that does affect shows. And it's how they deal with it. Now, there's one show that deals with it, I think, fantastically, and we're going to get to that eventually. But I don't see any issues with it somehow. But but they did bring that up, I know, and This Is Us, the pandemic issue. And so, anyways, I can see it going down a little bit because of that. Possibly, I felt a little weird when I think, watching those episodes or that season. Because I was like,
you can tell something's a little off or whatever.
yeah, just a little bit, obviously, but or maybe this is another thing. Sometimes it could be preachy, certain shows, or you feel like it, and I feel like it was a little bit maybe like, I at least got the vibe of it, and I don't. Like I said, maybe I was wrong, but if you get a vibe, maybe it is, a little bit more preachy. This is shows in general, by the way. Like sometimes you may come across like an episode or two or season, or I mean, obviously some shows are just preachy, but that can be an issue, I guess. But anyways, we are down to top, I think 6.
6, yeah.
So, for Akadi, it is House MD. This is also one of those shows that I think start off really, really, really strong.
Say it again?
House.
Oh, House MD. Okay.
Yeah. I love the show. But were the first couple seasons better than the second couple? Yes. Like about, I want to say season 4, there was like a change. Also, that was during the writer strike. I'm not saying that season was, but like that show in general had to deal with the writer strike. I remember a lot of shows just had like shorter seasons or sorry episodes in that season. Like in general, I think with TV shows, but there was, the show deals with a doctor trying to fix a patient that's having some ridiculous issue going on with them. Something that's real, but the likelihood of them having case after case after case is unrealistic. But it was still a very fun show. It's like Sherlock Holmes, but doctor. Like Sherlock Holmes, you probably are not going to have that many detailed murder mysteries, but the show is still really fun. Or the concept of Sherlock Holmes is really fun, and I think that's how House is. You could get old. The formula of the episodes. But I loved the character House. I loved a lot of the characters in the show. Akadi loves the characters. But that you could argue that it did go down a little downhill after a certain amount of seasons, unfortunately. But I still, the character itself, I think it was a strong factor of why I like the show. So, anyways, sorry. Oh, wait, you went silent.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I watched a few episodes of that show, and I thought it was fine. Maybe if you watch more of it, you'll grow to like the characters more. But I think I agree that it was a little formulaic. And I also kind of lumped it in with Blue Skies TV, that it wasn't like building towards something bigger. It was just going to the next episode and the next episode. And especially if that's the ilk of show you like, I can see that being someone's favorite. But I don't think I'd put that in my top 10. I don't know what you're thinking, Akadi. Get out of here with House.
Oh, that made her mad. That triggered her. All right, so what is your top 6?
Let's see. For 6, I think at this point I'm gonna name Better Things. It's a good follow-up to Atlanta. It's another FX show, which I'll say real quick that FX as a network, they have said when they take on a show, they tell the showrunners, as long as you have 2 of the following 3, as long as you have critical acclaim, loyal audience, or mass appeal. If you have a lot of people watching, or if you have a little people who watch religiously and buy merchandise or whatever, or if you're getting a bunch of awards, as long as you're getting 2 of those 3 things, they just won't cancel the show and they'll let you do anything you want. And they've pumped out some of the best shows of the past few years, including Atlanta is one, and Better Things is another. Better Things, the central character is Pamela Adlon. She also writes, directs, produces, stars. She does the whole thing. She, by the way, tid to bit, she's done a lot of things, but she's probably best known as the voice of Bobby Hill and King of the Hill.
Okay.
And in this show, she plays a mom, and it's kind of it's autobiographical. She's just incorporating like stories from her life into this show. And in the show, she has 3 daughters, and she works in Hollywood. And it's kind of like Atlanta. It's like these slice of life moments. It doesn't really go one episode to the next plot wise. It does build through a series of episodes, but it's more about just like moments of life, and sometimes in some episodes, it's just like 3 different short stories, one about one of the daughters, one about her, one about her neighbor, and they're not even connected. Over time you do get some character development, and but really kind of like Atlanta, it's just that every episode really makes me think that and a lot of times in some episodes it gets like really intense. You're like, what is happening right now? Like, what is this argument, or how did they get in this position? But you're still just completely drawn into the whole thing. And a lot of times at the end of the episodes or seasons or whatever, through the course of it, I feel like a better person. I don't know if that sounds cheesy, but I feel like I understand the world better. I feel like I understand the dilemma of parents better. I feel like I understand what women go through more for this show. I think this is a show, kind of like I said about Avatar, that everyone would be better off if they watch the show. Even if sometimes you're frustrated by it or you disagree with it, I still think it will make you think and make you reevaluate the world around you. And not to mention, I think it's kind of like Fleabag, and I think Atlanta too. They present themselves as comedies at first, but as you go through it, it gets some really serious moments and some really tough, interesting, thought-provoking moments. So, Better Things, highly recommend. Great show.
Awesome. My top 6 is. Oh, what's up?
Must see.
Oh. My top 6 is. So I have 2 animes on here. I actually don't consider Avatar an anime because that was made in America, which I think that's what partially is so amazing about that show, is it has the quality of a Japanese animation cartoon. I mean, obviously, they probably got some. I think they got Koreans to animate it, but that's beside the point. Overall, it was made in America. But I do have two animations, Japanese animations, and one of them is Trigun. I So in general, Trigun is 24 episodes. It's actually a pretty small series overall. You could just watch it pretty much in not one sitting, but overall like fast. But it's about a guy who's just pacifist. Like he has the power to kill anybody he wants, but he chooses not to because it's harder. Well, it's easier to kill people, I feel, just in general, but like it is hard to like try to resolve conflicts in a peaceful manner. And the show presents that, in multiple situations. I know it starts off as like a comedy, which I was a little thrown off guard. And then it goes like really dark. Like it gets really deep and depressing almost. But the show is just really good. I love everything about it. It is older, and there are issues with it, but as an overall, I think it's a fantastic anime.
I think I've seen the first few episodes, then I do remember liking it. I need to finish watching it. In fact, where is it? What platform is it on? Do you know?
Ooh, that's good. Good question. I actually don't know. It's
Probably should be talking about this for all the shows.
I own it, so I'm obviously gonna buy it. But I feel like it's like on Funimation or Crunchyroll or whatever, like one of those anime things. Streaming sources.
Figure it out.
Yeah,
I feel like that is a show I should finish. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't get enough of it. Of how I think good it is. You could argue that like the one that my other one that's on this pick. I was torn because this one's shorter, the other one's longer. But the other one does something that we'll talk about later. That I feel like Trigun doesn't do. But I mean, it's just pretty much me. Like Vash the Stampede is very similar to how I am in personality. I feel like, and I appreciate that. Like
goofy and friendly.
Goofy and friendly, exactly. And he's like I said, pacifist. Like I don't
hardworking, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that sometimes it's easier to relate to people like that. We're going to talk about. I feel like a series like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul eventually on this list, but there's a difference between those two series. We'll get to that later. But when you can connect to somebody, I feel like that does, or more people. I guess it's just not you, but like if a majority of people can connect to a particular character, that does help a lot. I think, in a series. Anyways, onto the top 5. What do you have? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I take this midway point? I wanted to point out. I had Fleabag on my list, and you had Firefly on your list.
Mm-hmm.
It was, something I was trying to think about for the nature of top TV shows. I feel like single season shows are almost a different category. I don't know if we should necessarily treat them differently, but I can't help but think about it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And it's especially the way things get released on Netflix now. Like another example how the industry is changing. It's almost like, if you have like, 10 1-hour episodes or even 8 or even 2 seasons, like 2 8-episode seasons that are 30 minutes each. Anyway, that's about the same amount of material as like a 3-part movie. Lord of the Rings is about the same amount of material.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of, I just wanted to at least throw a couple others out there that I was deciding not to include on this list, even though they're good and worth mentioning. I don't know if you have any others, but like Band of Brothers is really good, but it's just 1 season.
Yeah. So
I also didn't include that one because it's pretty violent. It's kind of male centric, so it doesn't hit as many bases. But
that's still on like for a list of like top best TV shows. That's on there. I still haven't seen it, and I want to see it. But you mentioned it, and a lot of people like that. Even though it is hard to watch because of the violence.
Yeah. It's, for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically about soldiers in World War II. It's a Steven Spielberg production, and they just kind of follow these soldiers.
I didn't know Steven Spielberg did that. I'll be honest. Yeah. I mean, I know he did Saving Private Ryan, so that's interesting. It makes
it almost like a movie. It's just a really long movie. It's just a Steven Spielberg TV show, yeah. And I want to go ahead and throw out a couple other shows that aren't the same ilk of like dramas and comedies that we're mostly talking about, but I still think are noteworthy. Like earlier we mentioned things like game shows like Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, or like news shows like 2020, or even The Daily Show. Comedy news shows are a whole new genre that's come up. But I want to point out, and we talked about like documentaries and nature shows, Planet Earth or whatever.
Yeah.
There was another one that I wanted to hit was Saturday Night Live. It's one
Yes.
of the longest running, most awarded shows of all time, and this also leads me to another thought, kind of like the game shows do, and also when we talked about the blue sky shows, like TV in the old days versus
Yeah.
now, where you can just watch one random episode, you don't need to keep up with it week to week or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it, uh, excuse me, it's how many episodes do you need to watch to say you've seen that show? This is just something I thought about a lot when I was making my list. Like, if you just see one episode of Game of Thrones, you can't say you've seen Game of Thrones. You know
No.
what I mean? If you've just
No.
seen one episode of I don't know, Breaking Bad, that's not enough. You need to see if
That's
even if you
tricky. I
only
feel like the answer to that is the season. Like it sounds silly, but like
yeah.
because you
I
won't understand the motivation of anything without knowing the beginning, middle, and end. At least of that season. You know,
so
It's-
yeah,
that's tricky. Yeah,
that was a
but
thought that I had. I thought about
until
it,
you
but like
think of
for
I Love
example,
Lucy or
if you watch one season of Game of Thrones, you haven't even met Stannis or Melisandre. You,
that's
you know what I
true.
mean?
That's
Like, I
true.
don't know if one season of Game of Thrones is enough, but I think if you just see 3 episodes of Jeopardy, okay, that's enough. You don't need to see a whole episode, a whole season
Yeah, I was
of
gonna say
Jeopardy,
that's tricky.
And so
Yeah, I Love Lucy is similar. Like if you watch 3 episodes, you at least get the
you
idea of
got
what
it.
this
You
is.
got this. You
Yeah.
know what that show is, right?
Mash, I
Yeah.
don't know because I don't know how Mash actually works. I've never seen it. I don't know if that's
I
like a continuous show or if it's like one episode. I know they have probably one episode, but I don't know if
It's
it's like.
pretty much Blue Skies TV.
Okay.
I think generally you could watch 3 episodes and pretty much get that show. But they did have a shift from the cast changed out, like, which is like a realistic thing that
Hmm.
happened because in the army, people get reassigned
Yeah.
and deployed and go back and different units and stuff, and that happened in the show. So the cast in the beginning is different from the cast in the end. So, but I think if you watch like 3 episodes in the beginning and 3 episodes in the end, okay, you got MASH. But so, and then you have shows that are only one season in the first place, like Band of Brothers or Firefly or whatever. So anyway, I thought as long as we're making this list and throwing this
Hmm.
out there, it's just interesting things to think about. I don't
That
have
is.
exact answers to it, but I think it's worth thinking about.
That is. Okay, so on our 5 list, Akadi's 5th list, which actually I think is a very good one. Full Metal Alchemist. Now there's Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I don't even know if I feel like you've heard of it, Sean.
I've seen a lot of Fullmetal Alchemist. I was watching it when it came out on Adult Swim originally.
Okay, so you saw the original, not the.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm pretty sure it was original.
yeah.
I think I might have later on seen episodes in Adult Swim if they
Yeah.
had Brotherhood on
Mhm.
there, and because I remember sometimes thinking like, "What's going on here?" Like it seems like it's changed. But I also know that when I wasn't able to watch Adult Swim religiously,
Yeah.
so I know I just haven't seen all the episodes in
Mhm.
order. But which again, to our question we were just asking
Yeah.
a minute ago, I don't know if I should count myself if I haven't seen that show. I
Yeah.
feel like I've probably seen 20-ish episodes,
Ooh,
but I
a
don't
lot.
think I've seen them all in order.
Mhm.
I don't know.
So this is like something I want to point out about the differences between the two shows. Like I know when they were making Full Metal Alchemist, the artist hadn't finished, so they had to continue on the show without the artist, similar to George R. R. Martin. And when she finished it, she was like, "Let's make Brotherhood," and so they made, Brotherhood was on the original content. They did like a jump start of like a couple of episodes from the original, and then they just veered off of where the show actually veered off. So they weren't like retelling a story, in a weird way. But I actually really liked the original a lot compared to Brotherhood. Now Brotherhood has like a lot of character development and good stuff, but one thing that I noticed about, for one, if you're unfamiliar with I'm sorry, Full Metal Alchemist, it is about 2 kids who are trying to bring back their mother, and you have it's going on the concept of everything has an equivalent exchange. So they do alchemy and they try to resurrect someone who is dead, what's equal to a life, and that's
It's
like
kind of a cross between sci-fi and fantasy,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much like one of the big themes about that is, what is equal, and they hit on a lot of different matters, in that show. But I felt like characters weren't immortal in that show. In the original, I meant. Like they would just take out characters like that, like out of nowhere. They're like, yeah, here's a main character, and boom, they're dead. And I appreciated that. And in Brotherhood, I felt like everyone was invincible, and that took away from the suspense of that show. And like I said, it does very, very good about character development. But when I'm not scared of what's going to happen, that's rough for me, at least.
I remember as I was watching it, I felt I had a problem that I have with a lot of anime, which, as we talked about, Trigun and also Cowboy Bebop, they're a little more finite. They didn't go on long enough to get out of control.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of times I start off in animes relating to if not the central character, one or several of the characters. A father trying to impress or a son trying to impress their father, or someone trying to like get promoted in the military, or trying to get the girl, something like that. But then after I don't know, after a bunch of episodes, suddenly they're like on Jupiter fighting a demon from the fifth dimension. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not relating to it anymore. It just gets, the power level gets out of control. The original dilemma of the characters isn't present anymore. It becomes impossible for me to relate or predict what might come from this or how I'd feel in these situations. And I felt like that was happening in Fullmetal Alchemist. Although, again, I can't be 100% sure if I was feeling that in Brotherhood or not, because I
you don't know which one was.
Episodes I was watching through Adult Swim, but I remember being hugely intrigued and impressed with the core idea of Fullmetal Alchemist, but then slowly losing interest. So.
That makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I do overall appreciate the original versus Brotherhood. They're still both good. It's just I think one was just better delivered. But that is Akadi's pick. So what is your pick, Sean, for 5?
All right, for my 5, I'm going to mention Game of Thrones. This show is a lot of people are frustrated with how it ended, which I think is understandable. As we just mentioned, that it was based on a series of books that was still being written, and the show got to where the books were and then just kept going without the material from the books. And the books have been out for a long time, so there's a lot of expectations from the fans, and the people making the show had this amazing source material to work with that they now didn't have. And I want to say, but they did their best, but by the end, you're kind of wondering if they were even doing their best. There's some frustrations with how it ended, but the fact is, it was so well done for the first 4 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it might be the best show of all time if you can only count the first 4 seasons. And it was such a huge phenomenon that so many people were watching it and caught up with it, and it broke all the records for awards won and viewership and just on, and how what a culture. I mean, people were naming their kids after the characters. Like, it just created a whole new piece of culture came from this show that's not done. I mean, still, I should have mentioned this. I do a podcast called History of Westeros about, it's more on the books than the show, but this show's been over for years. A book hasn't come out in years, and every week we talk about it for 2 hours. It's so full of characters and symbolism, and it's so rich. There's so much to it. It's so worth rewatching to catch all the stuff that's in it. The performances were amazing.
Yes.
The production, the costumes. I mean, it's just
the way they tell the story.
Yeah.
Like, I remember watching the first. So this one, goes back to that question. You're like, how many episodes does it take? I watched 3 episodes and was not invested. I watched the full season and was invested in that show. Like, it was like hard to grasp what was almost like going on, because there's so much detail, in season 1.
What do you mean when you say you weren't invested?
I didn't know if I was going to like the show or not. Like, I couldn't understand the characters. I was like, okay, this character may be good. Is this good? Is this well written, or is this badly written? Like, because I didn't know if there was cliches going on, but I realized no, the show is just really freaking good. And like
subverting cliches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember the second episode. There's something that was like unfair that was done, and I was like, it made me think, and that's why I realized I was like, that the show may have something. And as I kept watching, I started getting more and more invested in the characters, and I realized how well the characters really were. Because like in the first episode, they throw 30 characters at you. Like, they throw so many characters at you, and you're like, wait, what's going on? I mean, I kind of get this, but like, wait, who's important? Like
Yeah, we talked about Lost, how it's hard to say who the main character was.
yeah.
Like
They
if you had to pin one down, you'd say it's Jack, but there's really around 5 who are about even with him,
exactly
and 10 more almost who are just barely behind. And
37 main
Game
characters in
of
the
Thrones,
first
I think, is
episode.
even more. That's even more the case. What's that?
Heroes, horns. He said there's 37 main characters in the first episode. Yeah, so was that.
Yeah.
Yes, we are doing.
Even if you want to narrow down what you consider main, like I think 37 is a little inflated, but 12 is not. Like there are legitimate 12 main characters and a bunch of side characters. And
we're doing animes, by the way. Horn, sorry, answering Horn's question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're doing anime and TV shows also. So Akadi has a list that there's a lot of animes. But anyways, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that, but by the way, anyone out there who hasn't seen it, as we talk about it, I hope we don't steer you off by talking about the poor ending or the overwhelming characters. But because I do think this show is a must see. I mean, it's we're talking. My list here is top 10 must see TV shows, and this is in my top 5 of the top 10. And I do think it is. This is something I want to tell people about it. That the first episode, it's a little tedious because they are just introducing a bunch of characters. It doesn't start off with any kind of action. It's like in this world, it's like a medieval setting, and you have a king traveling with his court to his old war buddy to ask him to come back to help him be king. And so you have all these introductions. You have the king and all his the queen and the queen's brother and all the court, and then Ned, the lord he's going to visit, and his family and all his kids. You have all this stuff coming. It is worth noting the opening scene. I say there's no action, but the opening scene
is
that's
amazing.
Kind of the crux of it. Yeah, kind of the crux of it is that this sort of honorable but maybe naive Lord of the North goes south to help the king. And he ends up in this spider web of intrigue and politics that he wasn't really ready for. And most of the show is revolving around this struggle for power, this Game of Thrones, And there's just lots of characters involved, and they all get fleshed out really well. They're all interesting and intriguing. Even the ones you don't like are still interesting, at least, But in the meantime, we know from the opening scene that there are monsters. That there are these sort of zombie-like characters in the north that are a threat. But all these noble leaders are all sort of like oblivious to it, and are just worried about their own lives and power or whatever, while this threat is looming over them. And so as viewers, we know it's there, and it all unfolds. More characters get introduced. It spreads on different continents. It's such an epic show with such great characters. Must see.
So I know Horns points out that they should just make like a Snyder cut, basically redo the final season. I actually think that is impossible. I think they put too many. There's too many holes that were introduced earlier on seasons that would make that impossible. That's just me personally, and I know the books. Like if they had introduced certain things in the books, I think it would have made more sense. But okay, I'm going to defend Dan and Dave for a second. I know a lot of people don't like them. But George Martin spent 7-8 years on this last book, and you expect two guys who have no clue what's going on. They kind of do, but they're not George Martin. How the heck would they predict? Like there's a character that was never introduced in the show that was in the books that was I'm pretty sure is very important. And if they don't know how that character is going to end, why would they introduce them? So I think they had a lot on their plate that it was impossible to make it the thing that George R. Martin had planned, I guess, let's say.
Like, I think they could have done better.
They could have done better, but
but I also don't think they could have made everyone happy.
There's
just too many expectations. I started to say these books came out like in the 90s. There's people who read these books when they were 15, and now they're 40, and they watch the first couple seasons as it follows along the books pretty well, but then they start to get to the point where it branches off from the books, and they don't have the books to follow, and then there's also people who never read the books watching the show, and they have their expectations. There's so many characters and all. There's no way they're going to make everyone happy, and I think they could have, should have done better, but I don't think there's any way to like remake it and do it right. It's too much. And I even understand, even if they wanted to try to do, I think the main thing they needed to do was just have more episodes. They needed to have more episodes per season and more seasons. But I mean, we just talked about how many characters there were. How do you keep all these people together and their schedules? The kids are growing up. They're
Yeah.
filming on different continents. Like, just from a production
Yeah.
standpoint,
Like one of them,
it's just too
Peter
much.
Dinklage, and Peter Dinklage may have just wanted out. Like he knows his character's important, but like he's getting
How many
offers.
years
Like
of his life are these these actors sacrificing his family?
Hmm.
Never mind the actors, but all the film crew, the writers, the staff, the photographers, the boom operators, all those people have to like leave their families for months a year.
Mhm.
They've been doing it for 7 years already, and
Yeah.
well, we want to try to sum this up. Well, you need to take 4 more seasons. We can't keep everyone together for 4 more seasons. Well, we're gonna have to sum it up in 1. All right, sum it up. Well, I don't know. Do what you got to do. Like,
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
definitely tricky.
I don't want to rant on it too much,
Yeah.
but
Horn says, okay, but it's very clear that they listened to the fans for the last season, but instead of hearing them and making it better, they used it to steer what people were guessing and whatnot.
they did
Which
that
I
in
guess you
some
could
parts,
argue.
but not in all parts.
I
Like, it's pretty
guarantee.
clear they did that with the
Yeah.
Cleganes, but
Oh yeah, Click Games.
I don't think there was this. I don't want to spoil too much, but where Arya went, I don't think that was like an expectation of the fandom. I don't think
Yeah.
they were like doing what the fans wanted with that.
But by the way, I have a theory that the Arya thing may still happen in the book, but it's very,
might too.
very different, the situation. And it's very hard to explain without spoiling it. But basically, she does what she does, but the character she does it to is not who you expect. But that's, like I said, theories. Wait.
Yeah. Let's just say, just from, you could see anyone watching us right now, how hyped up we're getting about this thing. Just watch it. Stop at season 4 if you want. All the frustrations and disappointments that people have. Like, I think most people are mostly upset with just the last season.
Mhm.
As much as I love and defend the show, I still think the problem started in the 5th season.
Oh, absolutely.
Just watch it to season 4, then read the books. Just watch it to season 4, then read the books.
It's sad
That's what
because
you
like
should do.
one of the characters, it's like a love-hate decision. I think they did. There's a family that's introduced in season 5 that is so good in the books, and they did it not justice at all, and they decided to stop that storyline. So that's why I'm like, I guess I see why they did this, because they didn't know what the heck was going on with the storyline.
Get the Martells, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Martells.
Yeah, well, they were actually introduced in season 4. Oberon came in season 4.
That is,
and that was a highlight moment of TV history.
It really is.
Oberon in the mountain. So, yeah. Anyway, we should move on for Game of Thrones.
Maybe we could go on like a rant of Game of Thrones. Yeah, I was gonna say Game of Thrones on a different day. But anyways, okay. So, by the way, I have Game of Thrones on. I think it's like my 3rd, even though with the ending being disappointing. 1 through 4 is so good, and it changed how I think about writing and filming and all that. It's higher than me, but it's not my 1 or 2. So, anyways, let's go to well, since we talked about that, I might as well just that would be my pick for this area, just because we talked about that.
Okay.
So we're gonna go back to Akadi. Sorry. There you are. So Akadi's, we're on 4 now. Okay, so this is I can't wait to see your face. General Hospital. Okay, give General Hospital pointers. General Hospital may be the longest running TV show of all time. Like, I think it started in 1963.
It's one, but it's not the longest. Guiding Light. Guiding Light's the
Really?
longest.
Wait, Guiding Light. What is that? Sorry.
It's another soap opera, kind of like General Hospital.
Oh, okay.
I actually think it's reasonable for General Hospital to be on the list. Although I don't think you need to watch every season.
No,
it goes back to
no.
the
You don't
question
even.
earlier,
You
like
could,
how many episodes you need to watch
so,
to get it. But
if anybody knows what soap operas is they blow things out of proportion. It's kind of it's reality blown to an unrealistic expectation. But General Hospital is probably the best of them, arguably. Like, but I thought that was kind of fun that she put that on the list. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to cut you off.
No.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I did want to bring up Guiding Light, and as a potential must-see show, because it is the longest running show. It's also we mentioned Saturday Night Live earlier. It's a show that's been on. It's like a different type of show, so not like these plot character driven things, but Guiding Light is. And we also talked about the idea of like how TV used to be more blue skies, where you could just watch any random episode and it wasn't connected from one
Hmm.
to the next. But the exception there is soap operas. And by the
That's
way, they're
true.
called soap operas because they were aired during the day when, you
Hmm.
know, when you go farther back, the world's changed a lot. But even with the changes, there still is a much higher ratio of housewives at home during the day, just on average. But that's more true in the 70s or the 40s or whatever. And and we also talked about how TV in the past, you couldn't have streaming where you could have several different TV shows that would
Yes.
be marketed to different groups, and all those groups would subscribe, and that would be enough for the production companies to make money. In the past, you needed advertisers
Hmm.
that believed the show was successful enough to put their product on there, and they were trying to just appeal to as many different people as possible. And so you got very generic. You got very okay shows. Nothing great, but you got like good shows,
Yeah.
like Family Ties or whatever, NYPD Blue, things like that. But soap operas came on during the afternoon
Hmm.
when housewives would be at home, and so they would advertise to them. They would advertise soap. They would advertise
Yep.
like household things that housewives would need, pantyhose. That's the type
Yeah.
of thing, and they would use these TV shows as a model for that. That's why they're called soap operas, and that they were unique and that they were they would end on cliffhangers and were
Yes.
connected episode to episode because you
Yes.
could be more sure the housewife would be home at 1, 2 o'clock every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as opposed to the whole population being home Wednesday, 8 o'clock. You could be more sure the housewife would be home at that same time every day during the week. And so you
All
have a
right,
whole
heroes.
genre of
Have a good night,
shows.
heroes. Sorry, heroes is
Well,
leaving. But
you
no,
have a
you're
whole
right.
genre of shows in that category that air for a long time. And like you said, usually they're not really good TV. Usually they are just want to make sure you watch next week. So they
Hmm.
have these cliffhangers and these left turns, and they just have these actors with these names that don't have true, consistent, believable characters.
Yeah.
They just have continuity from one episode to the next for people to keep watching. But
Now, I will give soap operas props on. So something that people may not realize is so they're pumping out like 5 episodes a day. Like it's a lot of episodes a day, a lot of episodes a week, a lot of episodes a year. Um, and they are characters, so they have to read scripts. They have to read 100 pages a day. That's what they
yeah,
say. You know,
there's a lot of effort goes into
yeah,
it. I
yeah.
don't want to.
And like the cinematography, I'm not saying it's like Game of Thrones quality or but it's not like shitty. It's still consistent. They can't do action scenes. They have to focus on drama because drama is easier than action. And when they do action, it's really cheesy. But I do give them props on for what they have to do. It's phenomenal. Even like big actors have like gone to and they're like, I can't do this. Like this is impossible. Like there's no way you can memorize that many pages. A lot. So I give credit to the production side of it, even though it feels cheaper. Still a lot of work. So that was Akadi's pick. But is oh yeah, go.
I want to point out another ilk of show that's almost gone nowadays, but used to be a huge part of TV and another one of the longest running shows of all time. Westerns, Gunsmoke.
Ooh.
Gunsmoke is one of the biggest TV shows of all time. But nowadays, there's almost no Westerns out
I've
there.
never
There's
heard of
actually
it.
a couple actually now, that 1883 or something. There's a couple that are starting to spring up now. But Westerns were like half of TV through like the 40s, 50s, 60s. Like almost all the biggest shows were all Westerns.
Yeah,
Gunsmoke
that makes
was
sense.
the
Yeah.
longest running, probably, it might be hard to debate through the years over time, whatever, but one of the most popular, successful, longest running TV shows of all time was Gunsmoke. Didn't make my list, but definitely worth mentioning, honorable mention.
So what is your number 4?
All right, next up, I'm going to say The Office.
Ooh.
The Office is probably my favorite show of all time. It's the one that I've watched the most. It still makes me laugh every time I see it. And beyond just being funny or me liking it, I think it's really well made. I think they did a really good job of well developing a bunch of different characters, putting them through interesting situations that make us laugh, but also like, and I know this is kind of cliche or cheesy, but there's sometimes I'm close to tears. I really cared about those characters. I really felt like they were my friends. I
Mhm.
wanted good for them. I watched them grow over the years, and the thing is, the show was also hugely popular. It's a piece of culture that you should be
Really
aware
is.
of. I think The Office is a show you probably could watch 3 episodes and pretty much get it. It did develop characters and plot through the seasons, but I think its episodes do also stand alone. I think it walked that line really well. I
Mhm.
think the more episodes you watch, the more you'll appreciate it. The more you'll see how well designed the characters they were and how they grew over time. And over time they add more characters and the scope of it grows. But I, I'm a little biased because of how much I love it, but
No, I
I
think you're right.
think aside from that, I can still say it is a must-watch show. At least a few episodes. You should know. Everyone should know who Michael Scott is.
Yes,
Maybe not so much as Darth Vader or Superman, and he's in the
it's pretty
next tier
iconic.
down
Yeah,
of people you should know. Michael Scott, Dwight Schrute.
I actually had this on my list too. It got rearranged a little bit, but this was going to be the next one I was going to bring up. Also, was The Office. And I so can you get what the show's about in 3 episodes? Probably. I actually took 2 seasons to fully appreciate and actually care about the show because at first I was annoyed. I was like, God, Michael Scott's so freaking annoying, and that's part of the thing is that the show does push certain matters or personalities. But I just grew to love all the characters, and it's like
Yep.
it's kind of wholesome. Like I feel like anybody could watch The Office. I'm trying to think, but I think it can, right?
Yeah, I mean, it came on NBC.
Yeah.
It's not R rated. Sometimes they might be a little inappropriate. Younger kids probably it would just go over their head anyway.
Mhm.
There's not like gratuitous violence or sex. It's a workplace comedy. It deals with normal daily workplace stuff, which I guess isn't always. Sometimes
Yeah.
that is R rated, but
Yeah, because like
uh,
you could be bored at an office, and then someone does something silly, and then that just it makes like an
yeah,
avalanche of like really silly things. I miss that
yeah.
they do it really well, obviously in the show.
A lot of people will probably relate to having an inept boss. A lot of
Yeah.
people relate to different characters around the office who are different degrees of like experience or motivation or weirdness or whatever. And I will say a couple things. It's a lot of the show is cringe humor, which some people just
Yes.
don't like.
Yes.
And so I fully understand someone like I don't like that show. I get that, but I still think it's worth watching at least a few episodes to know what the show is. I've watched several episodes of shows that I know I won't like, but I still want to. Okay, I got that. I know that thing. There's
Mhm.
only so much time in your life, so you're not going to watch 8 freaking seasons of it if you don't like it. But I think it's worth watching a few episodes to
Yeah.
to get it. But I also think even with the cringe humor, the more episodes you watch, the more you're okay. Kind of like you're saying,
Yeah.
Michael Scott does a lot of inappropriate, annoying things. But usually, through the course of the episode, he learns a lesson. And
Yes.
it's not quite that cliche or formulaic, but it is, to your point, it's kind of wholesome. Like,
Yes.
the show is about being a good person. That's
Mhm.
really what the show is about when it comes down to it. And the first season is the show is based on a British show called The Office, and the first season is almost just exact replication, just
Yeah.
different
6
actors, but the
episodes.
plots and the lines, almost everything exactly the same. And a lot of people think it's not as good as the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I see that, but I think it's more because you haven't had a chance to learn about these characters yet.
Mhm.
And if you once you get to like the fourth or fifth season, if you then go back and watch the first season again, you're like, you know what, the first season was pretty good.
I
And
did that actually because I remember watching it. I remember just thought the first season was terrible, and I was like, they kept to their character really well. It's just I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
appreciate those characters back then.
Exactly. Yeah. It's also worth noting, even if that is true, the first season it's only 6 episodes, so
Yep.
even if it's not as good, you'll get through it pretty quick.
Also,
and get to the rest.
this is like a cultural thing, but there's a lot of memes on The Office, like a lot.
Yes, that's part of what I mean by must see cultural
Yeah.
phenomenon. I think that's an element. Same thing with Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
It's
Uh,
less true of some of the other shows we've said, like Atlanta or Avatar, but Lost was big enough. If the timing of Lost is a little bit different, we'd see more Lost memes. I
that's
guarantee
true.
it.
That's true. Um, so, well, since you brought up The Office and I brought up The Office, we're gonna go back to Akadi. Me and you are on like evens almost. Uh,
Not a coincidence.
so Akadi's. Oh, we're on top 3 now. Okay.
Yeah.
So actually agree with this one. This one may be a little biased, but Guyver, not MacGyver, but an anime series called Guyver. It was so a lot of people when they were introduced to anime and the U.S. culture, probably heard of Dragon Ball Z, and that was kind of what springed them. And then a lot of like, that's why I say Jump. Jump starts like a comic book that like introduced like potentially popular series. One Piece is on that. Naruto.
You might use a gateway show.
Yes. But Hyper was not one of those types of shows. It's like 6 episodes, maybe I think 12. Like season 1, 6, season 2's another 6. Season 2 is not as good as season 1, but it's just about a high school kid that's trying to live an everyday life, and he gets introduced to some alien-like device that pretty much makes him someone who can be killed, and everyone wants that, so they go after him and they go after his family if they don't get it from him. Pretty much that type of concept, but I remember it being very good and very impactful, because I didn't know what anime was back then. I was like, what is this? And it pretty much dived me into anime, and it may have dived, a couple of people. But I thought it was just really well presented, especially for it being so old. So yeah, that's why it's on Akadi's list. And it's short, it's definitely short. It's gory. Just so you know, it's not for.
Okay.
Even though I watched it as a kid, it's pretty gory. I
haven't seen it. I have heard of it. If it's short, it gets higher on my list of things to watch. So.
Yeah, like I said, 6 episodes. I think season 2 is not as good, unfortunately, but the quality of the animation went down, and you could maybe argue the storyline's not as tight. But anyways.
This is a little bit of a tangent, and I'm almost scared to bring it up because it could be a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I just want to give my perspective on the idea of anime. We talked earlier about, you said how Avatar technically is an anime.
Yes.
And how Guyver, some shows might be gateways to anime. But this is a thought that I have. The definition of the word anime doesn't matter as much anymore.
That is actually very true. Yeah. Sorry.
There was a time 30-ish years ago where if you watch an American cartoon and a Japanese cartoon, they were distinctly different. There were different styles of animation. There were different topics. There's all kinds of things that distinguish them from each other. I don't know, Smurfs and G.I. Joe versus Cowboy Bebop and Guyver, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe Robotech. Robotech was
actually Robotech. Anime, I think it may be one of the first. Yes.
Yeah. So, but as time progresses, they're inspiring each other. Japanese animators are doing all sorts of different things. Hello Kitty doesn't look like Guyver, right? And American animators are making Avatar, which is eventually the world's animation has become more homogenized. Everyone's taking pages out of everyone's books. Everyone is creating new different things from what the standard used to be. And you get to the point now where you say this is an anime. It's not necessarily going to be, I don't know, this sort of sci-fi, dark, cinematic style of Cowboy Bebop. It might be a goofy cartoon with little.
Oh yeah, there's definitely different genres like comedy or
and if you're talking about an American cartoon, it's not necessarily going to be a Inspector Gadget or Transformers. Even Transformers was already taking a page out of a. There's even like the Rankin Bass style, like the original Hobbit animated movie and Thundercats.
Actually,
and
those
are already like leaning into anime. But at this point now, I think the word doesn't, unless you're talking about animation from, I don't know, the 80s ish, right? I don't think it matters anymore today. So. For modernly produced stuff. I would say that.
All right, so that was her 3. Guyver, what is your 3?
All right, well, I'm gonna go on one more tangent real quick, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
I want to name a couple shows that I can imagine someone might expect to be up here that I just haven't seen. A couple holes in my viewership. Mad Men is one. I feel like that was a big, important, popular, acclaimed, well-made show. I just haven't seen it.
I haven't seen either, and I've been wanting to see it because I've heard similar things.
Yeah. Another one is The Crown. That's a little newer, maybe hasn't stood the test of time yet, but it was highly acclaimed over the past few years. Another one is West Wing, which I think has stood the test of time. I hold back on that one because it has... The Crown is about like the British Crown. Mad Men is about advertisers in the 50s. They're both dramas. West Wing is the West Wing of the White House. It's about politicians.
Yeah.
And that one, I it's just so much. It's like it's probably like over 100 hours of material. Like, I don't know when I'm ever gonna watch it. I feel like I should, but it's like I'll get there eventually.
Hmm.
Um, there's another one season show that also hasn't stood the test of time yet, but Chernobyl. That's one I feel like I should see. Another currently airing show, which is highly acclaimed, is Succession. It's about, I don't know, like a businessman and his family.
Hmm.
Um, Ted Lasso is another comedy that's really acclaimed right now. That's another one I should see. I want to throw these out there. Is that ones I can imagine people like, why wasn't that on your list? Like, I haven't seen them. Sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a couple others that didn't make my list that I think are definitely worth mentioning that maybe could have made my list. Veep is one of the most acclaimed comedies of all time.
Yes.
Uh, Along with Seinfeld is one of the best known comedies of all time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
neither of those are making my list. Both of them have Julie Louis-Dreyfus, by the way. So I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
I should at least give them some credit. And
Mhm.
Julie Louis-Dreyfus maybe should get some credit for 2 huge bits of success that she's had on
Mhm.
TV.
Yes.
And then another one that I still feel like I need to get in here into my list. I don't know how to do it. And it's one you probably would not guess. You might guess because I think we talked about it.
Mhm.
But especially this must see type list. And when you think of something that's must see, odds are you've probably seen it.
Yeah.
And we have named a few more niche type things,
Mhm.
maybe some newer stuff that maybe people haven't got to yet or hasn't gotten that big, maybe some like anime stuff that wouldn't hit everyone's base. But I'm going to name a show here that I bet everyone has seen and probably thinks everyone should see.
Mhm.
And like we've also talked about, you probably haven't seen every episode, but you only need to see a few to get it.
Is this going to be your third one, or is this going
This
to be?
isn't even going to be my third
Okay.
one. It's
Okay.
one I feel like should have made the list, and I
Okay.
want to mention
Yeah.
Sesame Street.
Yes.
Sesame Street is a top 11 must-see show.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would kick out of my top 10 for it, but I think it is
I think it's
much a
true.
part of culture as any of
It
these
is.
other things we've seen. It presents good messages. It's important to see.
It's kind of like
Part of it
Muppets.
might be, yeah, especially if maybe you kind of include at the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
And
But I
that
think
whole
Sesame
world,
Street's actually even more relevant.
even yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe part of why I didn't list it is because I just assume you have seen it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to tell you to see this because you just have. You just
Yeah.
can't exist in America or the modern world and grown up without having at least seen a few episodes of Sesame Street. So,
Mhm.
One, I wanted to give it some credit. Two, anyone out there who's thinking about their list, I want you to think about things like this. But I will move on to another show, which probably hits almost everything I just said about Sesame Street,
Yeah.
which is The Simpsons.
I
And
knew you were going to bring that up. I
yeah,
was 90% sure, which
and
is very true.
with this. Yeah, I debated with this a lot too because there are several other shows that could go in this slot. There's several other shows. Simpsons just beats them out, but South Park and King of the Hill
Mhm.
and Futurama, and it's a little bit newer, but Bob's Burgers, they're all similar. They're all like shows, animated comedies that have run for a long time, that usually fundamentally have some sort of theme or moral or message behind them. They get to play around with the types of shows they make because they're not limited by a
Mhm.
budget as much. You know what I mean? But since it's more than eight, do you know how many times I go, don't, like, whenever I ever mess anything up or stub my toe, I'm not even thinking that I'm saying dope like hit Homer Simpson. I just do it. It's just part of who I am now.
Mhm.
It's just Simpsons. I think kind of like Sesame Street. Whether you like it or not, whether you've watched it or not, whether you realize it or not, it's part of your world. It's probably part of your psyche, and I think it's got to be included as a must see
And
TV.
I think Simpsons also does a really good job of relating. Like, it's not completely unrealistic. All those characters, like
Keeping up to date with what's happening in modern society. Yeah, and that show's been on like 30 or more years, and that's
I was
maybe
thinking
some
that
of these other shows we named have also been 30-ish years, but like
the only one I think that beats it
anyway.
is General Hospital on our list. Like,
Yeah,
that's how it's been a part of the culture for that long and still ongoing. I think. I don't think they canceled
it's
it yet.
still going.
Yeah.
No. And also they have like 20 something episodes per season. It's not like 8 episodes. They have a lot of episodes per season. They've been doing it for generations.
And give props. I was gonna say give props to the actors because like the actors are still doing it. To my knowledge, I don't think they recasted. I could be wrong on that, but
yeah, maybe a couple here and there, but generally speaking, it's all
yeah.
the same crew and actors and everything. And again, I think it would be reasonable for someone to have South Park on their list, but South Park gets a little more raunchy. For a must watch, you know what I mean? I think that kids probably shouldn't watch that. And South Park, one reason I might put it higher on how much I like it or how well made it is, because I think they do a better job of addressing social issues. But it's not like Simpsons doesn't do that at all.
Right.
And anyway, you know, like I've pointed out, I might have a different list if I was making my 10 favorite or the 10 best. But when you're talking must see, Simpsons gets in there.
So for my top 3, technically Game of Thrones was top 3, but the one right below it was my other anime series, Hunter x Hunter. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. It's technically a jump start.
Wait, you know? Maybe I have.
It's sometimes just like Hunter x Hunter, but
yeah. Like a vampire hunter, right? Is that the theme?
No, actually.
No, so, maybe I'm messing up with something different.
So when I first watched the series, it was on TV. I want to say Cartoon Network, but I not like the first season. I thought I would. Well, let me phrase that. The first couple of episodes are like hard to get past. You have to get past the first couple of episodes. But it's about a kid named Gon who is trying to find his father. That is literally the basis of the story, and it has like 5 seasons. And the kid is, you know, this world is a little bit more special, you know, kind of like Dragon Ball, like, you know, you could have like energy balls or whatever, but like how they present it. So after the first season, there's something they do at the very end that made me think. I was like, what the heck just happened? Like, you know, it gets better as like the first season goes by, but like at the end, I was caught off guard. I was not expecting how they were going to tell the story, because I thought it was going to be like this cliche type of thing. And that's why I was like not liking the story overall, or in the first season, even though some characters were interesting. But after the first season and season 2, they introduced this concept. It's more of like the Dragon Ball thing, like these energy type of things. But each season, as I kept watching, you know, season 2, season 3, season 4, it's like a completely different show. Like they just revamped the show with the same characters. And I just couldn't help but appreciate that, because, you know, they went away from the tropes. And this is another thing, like Dragon Ball, why I personally don't like it as much as, you know, the main character, Goku, just keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger to beat his opponent. Like, let's say he's like 1,000, you know, power level, and the enemy he needs to face is 10,000. He has to get to 10,000. And it just seems like it's like this long, ongoing thing. Well, in Hunter x Hunter, that's impossible. But in Hunter x Hunter, the main character Gon is weak. Like he is like this. He comes across these guys and they just could like rip him apart, like kill him and kill anybody he's around. You know, the people he's with. So, but the story's not about that. It's how do you deal with this? And how do you deal with these situations where you can't get out of? And they just do such a good job on presenting that. And the villains are so flushed out. Like they're not this like one evil person, which makes Game of Thrones really good. There's a lot of gray area. And for them to keep doing that season after season, I give props to that series. Now I do know it's a remake.
Episodes per season.
So like the first season may have been like 24, and the second season may have been 24. But I remember the 5th season being like 100 episodes. Like it was so much.
Oh god.
Now
this is a must-see show. I don't know if I'm seeing this one.
Yeah. I think season 3 is incredible. Like I debate about like which season's better. Like I said, they're all really good. Other than season 1, you know, maybe the end of season 1's good. But
was this Akadi's number 3 or your number 3?
This is my number 3.
Is your number 3? All right.
But now, like I said, and this is like for people who are like anime fans and like want to go into like a series that's longer, you know, like a
makes
jump.
Sense that your list is going to be, your must-sees are going to be more geared toward anime than mine.
Yeah. And like I said, this is like probably my top anime recommendation. Just because of how they deliver. You have to get past season 1, like I said. Maybe you'll like the episodes. I mean, it's kind of kiddie-ish. And then they randomly throw like a couple of like a dinosaur eats a person. You're like, wait, what just happened? You know, like, is this for kids? And then you get to the end, you're like, I can see this being more mature, you know. But overall, I think it's a fantastic, especially for it being like a jump series, a fantastic series. One of the top animes of all time, I think. But and a lot of people consider that too. So okay, so that's 3. Well, that technically was 4 for me, but 3 is Game of Thrones. But now we're down to the top 2. So what is top 2 Akadi? Oh, she had Game of Thrones. Of course she would. We're from like a castle, so and she could relate to it, even though it's deeper. So that one's knocked out. So Sean, what is your top 2?
All right, I'm gonna say I'm kind of debating a little bit about which one of these to name first, but I think I'm gonna. There's one that's a little more on my mind at the moment, so I'll wait to name that as number 1, and it's also gonna spark a little bit more discussion of other things.
Okay.
So I'll name my number 2 first,
Huh?
and in this one is another one where I am maybe cheating a little bit. Star Trek. Star Trek.
I think this is very good. I remember seeing that on the list, and I was like, I didn't think about that, but it's part of culture. Like it's always part of culture. It feels like.
Yep. Remember earlier I said that I had a sci-fi pick, and I mentioned Expanse, but the one that I am actually picking is much higher on the list, especially as a must-see TV show, and especially if I can cheat by just saying Star Trek in general, not having to pick one certain Star Trek series. I think if you do pin me down to just say one, I don't know. I'd probably say Next Generation or the original, one of those two. I would be happy if I could say just those two. I think that would be.
No, I think that's fair. Honestly, I think that's completely fair. Saying the whole Star Trek,
But the fact that there are so many other series have come out is part of why I'm picking it. Like even if I only get to pick one, I'm still gonna pick one because it just shows how pervasively popular it is. How everyone kind of like I've said a few times, like whether you like it or not, everyone does know who Big Bird and Superman and Darth Vader, Batman, like these characters of the world. We all, I don't know, Seinfeld is maybe not quite at that level, but you can see what I'm saying. Like even if you don't like Seinfeld, you probably know there's a show called Seinfeld that has Jerry in it. And it's a comedy, and everyone freaking knows who Spock is. Everyone knows what the Enterprise is. Everyone knows like a tricorder and a communicator. Those little sounds, not just the images, but the sounds of Star Trek, the transporter beams. Those things are just part of our culture. And that show also, I want to give credit. Even as an older show, it wasn't just a bunch of old white men. Like they had Uhura on the bridge. They were trying to incorporate aliens. They were being very progressive with having women as part of the officers and the crew in this exploratory role. They had in the time of the Cold War, they had a Russian and a Chinese guy. You know what I mean? They were like very specifically trying to be inclusive and think of things from a more worldly perspective. And it spawned, not directly, but Star Trek, at least indirectly, led to Star Wars. And
I was gonna say
multiple other series, and has just perfect. Even like the follow-up shows, maybe not quite as much as Spock. Pretty much everyone knows who Picard is. Data. Worf, these characters, and you still have the Enterprise in different forms.
And
like
Picard has like a new show, in the last year.
Yeah,
but the Picard,
even that show's a couple generations old and is still being rejuvenated. I think there's like 3 or 4 different Star Trek shows airing currently, to give you an idea. And even if I don't count any of them, I'm still gonna pick Star Trek for all those reasons I just spewed out. I think it's a lot of the technology that they predicted early on. Like think about the communicator. We just have that now. That's what my phone is. Like the way they were like computer. Patrick Stewart would be like, computer, what's the population of what
Oh my god,
we can just do. We even have the same sort of voice activation, the same sort of technology that they were predicting as far as like video communication. Carrying communication around in our pockets, even things that they would like use as tricorders, like scan things for information. Our phones do that, like they really had a vision for where technology was going. They had a vision for how more inclusive society should be. They were presenting interesting sci-fi dilemmas. They were making social commentary. They got little bits of humor mixed in there. Sometimes it's corny, sometimes it's cheesy. Sometimes they had a low budget or the action wasn't that great. But the fact is, it is an integral, pervasive, important classic, traditional, continuous part of our culture, and I think it's a must-see, top 3 must-see TV of all time.
It's funny because you know in the movies, Star Wars was up there, and I feel like this has like been a big like debate. Which one's better, Star Wars? This is 4, 5, 6, obviously, or Star Trek. You know, like I don't know if things like that nowadays that are like that, but like back then, you know, I think that's just cool that you know like they were both very well done, very received, you know, very popular. You know, changed the culture. That people had to like, which one's better, Star Trek or Star Wars? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, like Star Trek was a TV show,
Exactly.
and so in certain ways it was more limited by like its budget. Does that make sense? It couldn't quite be the big thing in the movies that Star Wars was.
Yeah.
But then eventually it also got movies, and now Star Wars was just movies, and so it didn't have as much material as the TV shows. But now Star Wars has like 8 different TV shows on too. Like they're both like I didn't consider making Star Wars TV shows must see. I think because for me at least, it's covered by the movies. I could see someone doing that. I think in general the Star Trek TV shows, these modern Star Wars TV shows are being done better, and so are the Star Trek ones from the past. But I want to give some credit to the pioneering of Star Trek.
Yeah.
For as far as TV shows, and I want to give credit to the pioneering impact of Star Wars as far as movies goes. So I don't know if I had to pick one of the others. Like I am a very big fan of A New Hope and of Empire Strikes Back, more so than Star Wars as a whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm also more a big fan of Star Trek as an idea than I am the details of the shows, because I can see that they're poorly paced or cheesy action, stuff like that. But all those kind of nuances or nitpicks aside, they're still must see. They're both must see. Whichever one's better, they're both must see.
All right, so for mine, I'm gonna save technically my 2 for number 1 because I feel like it may be the same thing that's gonna spark something. But my number 2, well, number 1 and 2 basically. I'm a huge fan of 4. Everyone knows that. So
I guess what you're gonna say?
Yes.
The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. Absolutely. So I remember when season 1 came out. I mean, this is like, you know, 2010. Maybe I saw it in 2011. I was like, that's a cool concept, but I wasn't invested enough. I feel like this happens with TV shows in general. Like even with Game of Thrones, you know, like I watched a couple and I'm like, it's a cool concept, but you know, I'm not invested. And then as the more you watch it, the more you get invested. And that's kind of what happened with The Walking Dead. The production value got like way better as it kept going on, and how they told the story and all that. But the biggest thing why I like Walking Dead, other than the fact that it's a horror, it's a, you know, great zombie flick, is the characters. Like the characters are so well fleshed out, which is why I like Game of Thrones so much, and something we're probably going to be talking about soon. And I remember, you know, like it's on its finale season right now, which I think they're doing an incredible job. It's based off of a comic book, Robert Kirkman's. There was a point in the comic book that they implemented in the show, because obviously they try to keep it true to the source, that I thought people were becoming too invincible, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like the show as much anymore. And then they changed it. They just killed off 2 characters, 2 really, really big characters, you know, and a lot of people were turned off by it. And I surprisingly was like, oh, now I could fear for these characters again. You know, they kind of like, what was it called? Shuffled things up, or, you know,
shook things up.
Thank you.
It made you like it more, not so much that you wanted those characters to die, which is an understandable reason if people are invested in certain characters to be turned off if they die. But you now worry that anyone else might die, and so in these actiony moments that might become cliche or formulaic, suddenly they're more meaningful.
Exactly. And I kind of like look at this at the series as a whole, because like certain seasons are not as good as others, but overall they're still really good. And they made spin-offs like Beyond the Walking Dead, which is okay. it's just okay. It's not like great. And then Fear the Walking Dead, which have some really good seasons and some really terrible seasons. And I get confused on that series. But as I kind of like put them all as a whole. At least you see what's going on with certain characters, and they focus on the characters in this apocalyptic, zombie world. And I just love it. And this last season's just been, like how they're wrapping up. It's like it was like the weakest season in the comic books to me personally, and they changed it and they made it like just so much better. Dealing with politics, but overall, it's my 2 or 1.
There's something I keep like everything we talk about. I want to say this, and I keep forgetting. We're back when we were talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And you said that you weren't as invested in the first episode, and I started to talk about how like I understand the first episode was like a little tedious, and it's introducing a whole bunch of characters, and it's hard to keep up with everything going on. There's not like a lot of action or comedy in it.
Yeah.
But that final moment of the first episode, to me, should get you invested.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
And then you followed up with saying, like, even after the first season, I wasn't that invested. Like, well, the final moment of the first season, well, not even final moment, the second last episode of the first season, that's when I was like,
I was completely invested, like all the way. Also, I didn't know what was going to happen in Game of Thrones. Like, I was like, how could they do that and continue the story plot? And they do it. Yeah. They make it better. Like the story, it just gets more and more intriguing. So the thing about Walking Dead, and this is like why I didn't like the first season as much, is the main character's Rick. This character's not going to die, which is fine. You have to have a main character that you kind of like go through the apocalypse with. But he has a family, and I'm like, check, they're not dying. The kids has to survive. The wife has to survive. Like, it's just a must. And then they introduce a couple of other characters, and they start killing off some people. Which I'm like, okay, characters could die, but I'm like, there's still these two are that this family is safe. Like, there's no way. A spoiler warning, that doesn't continue throughout the series, like the seasons I meant, and it threw me off guard. I was like, oh, okay, they're willing to kill off certain characters, to drive the plot, to tell the story, which scared me, like, 'cause I'm like, I want to be invested in these characters, but they could die, so anyways, I thought that another factor why I appreciate Walking Dead, they play this fine line between characters they could kill off and characters they can't. Like, I meant, like, if you kill off so many characters, you're not just going to be invested anymore. Like, it's just a thing that people will have, and I feel like they've been juggling that throughout the season up till now, and I love it, but like, I know that's so hard to tell a story like that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
somewhat. In Game of Thrones or some other shows where no one is safe. Like, whoever you think is the main character or the good guy, and they might die. Like, it changes things. But you still don't think everyone's going to die. Because, I mean, maybe it's a higher ratio if they're a war or something. But in Walking Dead, you are in this world where just being alive in a world is dangerous. Does that make sense? So it is more likely for people to die. And so you kind of need them to. And in reality, probably more of them would than what the show shows, but you can't let them all die because you need the audience to be invested in someone. I can see the dilemma that they have. I'm not as big a fan of horror in the first place. I still watched the first couple seasons of that show, and what I really liked about it was the sort of moral dilemma. When society is not stable, when we have to pick and choose who to let into our community based on how much food we have or whatever, that it creates interesting dilemmas. And I think it's a neat study on human nature to do that. And I think the show did a good job of that sometimes, but other times they were just doing like horror action. I just didn't care about it. So
yeah. And that's like the thing about, I'm going to bring up Fear really fast. I'm watching Fear and still currently going. There are certain situations that you're like, how is this happening? Like, there's a whole pack of zombies and they get stuck into a tight situation and they put a little gate in front of them, and you're like, they should be ripped apart, especially according to the other series.
Yeah.
How are they having this calm conversation? Yeah. And it takes me out. Or certain characters will do certain things that you're like, they should be acting this way according to how they set it up, and they don't. Here, I'm having like, well, I hate relationship right now with it. I'm still watching it because I'm a huge fan of Walking Dead, and I want to. Honestly, also, it's a great comparison between Fear and another show that's going on right now, which I'm hoping we're going to be talking about in just a sec. We'll get to that in a sec. But anyways, overall, the original Walking Dead is a huge, like, I love it like so much, so can't get enough of it. So that brings us to our first pick. And Akadi's first pick is Battle Athletes, which her name was originally originated from. So, of course, she's going to choose that out of bias. But it was a show that was in the 90s that's about Olympics, an animated or anime that's about Olympics set in the future. And for some reason, only girls are allowed to participate in this Olympics. And I thought that at first was like, that's weird. Like, I didn't realize that was a story plot, just like but they have like interesting twists and turns about a relationship of the main character Akadi trying to deal with her friend / competition. And it's a short series. It's like 24 episodes. And I really liked it other than, so, like when I watched it on a DVD. And like, I want to say there's like 3 or 4 episodes on each DVD. The last DVD is terrible. But pretty much how it ended was cheesy. But before that, I thought it was really good. If they like cut out that last couple of episodes, I thought it would have been a fantastic series. But like I said, she puts it on top because it is biased of her.
Some things are going to be your favorite and get bumped up.
Yeah.
I don't know if her list is necessarily even her must see versus her favorite.
That is true. That is true. What do you mean it's a must see? No, it's not. We're going to ignore her. So I think our top is going to be something we are going to be discussing in future streams. Is that correct?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So I'm just going to name it Better Call Saul.
Yep.
So fun. There are 2 shows technically, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I kind of clump them into one. Now, I think Better Call Saul is actually better, but it's not saying that Breaking Bad is bad because it's still really good. It's just Better Call Saul is better. It's all these people who invested in Breaking Bad and they made a better show. They learn more. They learn how to storytell. They learn how to do. They do a lot of symbolism and colors, and there's a lot that's so good about the show. Honestly, it's like a masterpiece when it comes to film, I think. Anyways, I'm gonna let you talk for a sec.
Yeah, for this is a tough spot because I've mentioned this a couple times. I used the example crime dramas a few times as like a spot to fill, or multiple spots to fill into a top 10 list, because it's one of the biggest, most popular, usually some of the best shows or crime dramas. Anyone out there who's been listening to us might be expecting us to say Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad. Those shows are typically in top 10 lists if you look at anywhere. And I can see someone having all those in their top 10. And, again, maybe a list might be different if it's your favorite or your must watch or what you think is best made or whatever. And at one point, my top list, I don't know quite what I was making, how I was compromising all those different variables, but I think it had all those in there. But if I just had to pick one, which I kind of decided for the sake of my top 10, just to pick one show to represent that genre. And there's others too that maybe are worth noting, like Law and Order, for example.
Yeah. SVU. It's been going on forever. Like, I think they're on the 22nd, and it's still like they bring relevant stuff to it.
But Better Call Saul, I think, is just the best one. I think it is one of the best made shows of all time. And I mentioned this earlier too. I wanted to try to just use shows that have stood the test of time. I think having a good ending is important, but I put Lost, and we both put Game of Thrones on here, which have questionable endings, and I put Atlanta on here, which hasn't ended yet. But I trust Atlanta will end well. Atlanta also isn't like this plot-driven mystery intrigue that they need to tie up perfectly in the end. So it won't be hard, I don't think, to end that well. Better Call Saul is though, but I trust them to do it. They've done so beautifully well producing this show. I think that, just like you were saying, Eric, the people that made Breaking Bad were making one of the best shows ever, right? Like that show won a lot of awards, and it's on a lot of people's top all-time lists. But one thing to keep in mind is that since that show came out, more shows are being made. gonna say better shows are being made. Like the more effort, more talent, more money, more everything is going into television production.
Yeah.
Partly because of shows like Sopranos and Breaking Bad have demonstrated there's demand for it, and there's room to develop great characters and worlds, and so it just makes sense to me that the people who made Breaking Bad, when they start to make a new show, of course it's better. Like they didn't get worse, you know what I mean? They
I
didn't
mean, I
make
guess you
that
could argue
show.
that they
They
got
didn't
worse
forget
because
how to use a camera, like
I think that
like
was like a fear.
so.
I remember when you were like, because I didn't see Breaking Bad till more recent. I'm sorry, yeah, Breaking Bad till more recently, and then Better Call Saul. I want to say it was like a year or two. Like it was fairly recent, but like Sean, he would be like, I think Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad. And he was like on season 1 and 2, and then he's like, but I can't. Like I have to see how let's give it more, couple more seasons. When season 3 came out, he's like, it's just better. You know.
I think by the end of season 3, I wasn't. I one, I wasn't even sure watching it if it was better. Like I could tell it was really good, but I wasn't sure it was better. I think by season 2, I was thinking, I think this show's better, but I felt like it was too controversial. You know what I mean? Like Breaking Bad was so well thought of that anyone, if I said that, people would laugh me off.
Yeah.
By season 3, it's like if they laugh me off, it's because they haven't seen it yet. I
Mhm.
think if you just have seen it up to the end of season 3, you'll be like, oh man, I think this is better. You know, like maybe someone is really stubborn or stuck in their ways. They won't think it's better, but they won't argue with me saying it. And I think at this point, I don't even think anyone's gonna. I mean, I'm telling you, it is so good. I mean, I'm sure there's some people out here, diehard, Breaking Bad fans who aren't gonna give in on that point. But I feel confident. Here's some reasons. Just to start with, I think it's easier to relate to. I'm going to try to talk about it without spoiling too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Really the
but
character.
the basic premise of Breaking Bad is that there's a high school chemistry teacher who finds out he has cancer and can't pay the medical bills, and decides that he's gonna make, and this is kind of maybe a big jump, but I think it's kind of a big jump for someone to do this, right? It might be hard to believe, and maybe a reason some people might not get into the show. My family didn't really get into it. They just didn't buy or like the idea of this, but he thinks that, hey, I have the wherewithal to produce meth, and if I can sell it and make a bunch of money, my family will be better off when I die. You know, I'm dying anyway. It doesn't matter if I get arrested and go to jail or get killed doing drugs or whatever else. I'm dying anyway. I might as well try to make a bunch of money for my family, you know? And so
it sounds honorable, not honorably. Like
yeah,
a
like
fine
maybe
line.
an end justifies a means sort of way.
Yeah.
And I think through the course of it, to me, what I kind of got from it was that really Walt was a bad guy in the first place, and this is releasing it in him. And we're watching this guy sort of shed his morals to see how much of a drug pen he can be or whatever. That's kind of hard to relate to. You know what I mean? It's like, I remember when I shed my morals to be a drug pen.
That's all you know.
It's not something. It's something you're kind of frustrated or disappointed in as you watch it, even though it's well performed and well directed.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's a lot of intrigue and suspense. I'm not relating to this character very much.
I remember when they
root for him.
Introduced Gus and Mike, which are characters a little bit later. I cared more about them and thought they were good guys. These are villains. Like there's a lot of villains. You know, I guess you could argue gray area, but they're doing stuff that's not for the law, basically, when it comes down to it. I was more invested in them and cared about them, and I was like wanting them to win. You know, whether they win or not, that's to be determined unless you watch it. But you know, I was rooting for them more than Walter.
Yeah,
which I thought was interesting. Anyway,
so Better Call Saul in that Breaking Bad world, eventually Walt realizes he's going to need a lawyer. He needs to find a way to like launder money. Like people that he's got under him are going to end up being arrested. He just realizes it's just going to be part of this thing he's getting himself into, and it's kind of a classic line. Jesse, who's like Walt's partner, sort of tells him, he's like, "Look, you don't need a criminal lawyer. You need a criminal lawyer." You know. And then we get introduced to Saul Goodman, and he's this fast talking, ambulance chasing, shady character who helps Walt do all the things, all the stuff behind the scenes he needs to make his drug trade work, and so Better Call Saul is just like a spin-off. It's a flashback to we see how this character Saul Goodman got to be in that position. We see
Mhm.
where he came from and how he got to be there. And this Better Call Saul show is more about, first of all, it's not just about him, right? It's as much about the people who need to call Saul as it is
Exactly.
about Saul, you know. And we see different people struggling to figure out their morality rather
Mhm.
than abandoning their morality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that is much more relatable. It's much more relatable to see Saul try to live up to his brother's expectations, to see him try to find success in this world of law despite, you know, mistakes he's made in his past. To see him, you know, usually when he does a bad thing, we're like, oh, we're like disappointed, or we're like, well, what else can he do? Like, you know, we at least want to try to relate to him.
Mhm.
Whereas Walt, you're like, this guy needs to lose in the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Like I said, I brought it back. Like I was rooting for the other guys more than Walt.
and yeah,
Just shouldn't
and
be.
most of the characters surrounding Walt are also pretty bad people, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas the characters surrounding Saul are either good and or gray.
Mhm.
Uh, and even the ones that maybe are bad, they still find ways to present them in protagonistic ways.
Yeah.
And I could go on and on. I don't want to give away too much. I do want to say another thing. So that was all a big ramble about one reason why I think it's better is because it's more relatable characters.
Yeah.
Another reason I sort of touched on, sort of just generally the idea that they're just better at what they're doing. You know what I mean? That it's the same set designers and costumes and you know, writers, directors,
Mhm.
lighting and cinematography is all the same people still working on it, and they've honed their craft. Things that they had sort of an idea for in Breaking Bad, that they might have worked on and developed through the course of it, they start off with fully fleshed out when they go to
Mhm.
Better Call Saul. A specific detail I'm going to bring up is how they use color. So in Breaking Bad, color yellow was supposed to represent the meth trade. And the
Mhm.
deeper in or closer to it you were, the more shrouded in yellow you would be.
Mhm.
So Gus always has a yellow shirt. Walt and Jesse, they're like in a lab cooking meth. They're in like these yellow, you know,
Mhm.
hazmat suits or whatever, you know. On the far end of the color spectrum of yellow is purple.
Right.
And so another character in the show is Hank, and his wife Marie, she's like completely removed from all this drug trade stuff, and she's in purple. She has like her kitchen has purple curtains, and she has a purple shirt, a purple car, like she and so the thing is, and it goes from there. Like as you approach the meth trade, like you know, Hank was a cop who was like trying to catch him. He was in orange usually. uh
Oh,
and they had
interesting.
other factors too, like through the course of the show, Walt's clothing got darker. He started off in like beige and baby blues, and he eventually he's dressed in all black, you know. So you could see they had these ideas, but if you watch it really close, not to nitpick, it's not they didn't do anything wrong or bad,
Mhm.
but they just weren't fully consistently using this.
Yeah.
And in Better Call Saul, they are. It's completely consistent and pervasive through the whole show. Characters in blue, and I say characters in blue, but even if blue's around, like not just like the color shirt
Yeah.
they're
It could be the
wearing, but like
wall. It
if
could be
it's
the
a blue wall in
sky.
the
Mhm.
background, or the car they're driving, or the shade of light that's being cast on them, or
Mhm.
on and on. Blue represents legal, moral, positive protagonist. Good. Uh, and sometimes it could be relative to. I'll explain it more in a second. But red is negative, illegal, bad, immoral
Yeah.
antagonist. And so when a character comes, and they're doing it right from the get-go. So Saul, his character, he's driving around this beat up old car that's yellow with one red door. And so I didn't say this, but yellow represents like transition and uncertainty. And so his character's kind of, he's like this shady guy who he's not a straight up evil bad guy, but he's not really a total moral good guy either. He's kind of in the middle, but he's leaning to the bad side with his one red door and it's a yellow car. And at one point through the show, he kind of straightens himself out a little. I don't want to spoil too much, but it goes through a lot. And at one
Mhm.
point, he gets a good job with the law firm, and he goes from wearing his gaudy yellow and purple suits to just a plain blue and gray suit. How he's gone from being shady and in the middle to being a good guy, and the company gives him a car,
Mhm.
a blue car. and he has this mug that his girlfriend's given him. It's like a coffee thermos, and it's red and yellow, world's best lawyer. And he gets in his new blue car with this yellow and red thermos, and it won't fit in the cup holder, and it's just a perfect encapsulation of what's going on in his life, you know. And I'm just telling you, once you see this, every single scene of the show, you realize they're telling a story using these
Mhm.
colors. It reveals the intent of characters. Sometimes you're not sure what Jimmy. By the way, Saul Goodman is like a fake name he made up. So Jimmy McGill's his real name. And so sometimes you're not sure what Jimmy's up to. But you could tell whether he has a red tie or a blue tie or a yellow tie what he's up to. When a new character comes on screen, if they're wearing a red shirt, you're like, oh no, this is going to be a bad guy. It's like it's a clue to where the plot is going. It's an indication of what a character is thinking or feeling. They use it constantly, pervasively, and it's just one element of the show to show how carefully they're planning every little detail out. I could go on and on about it. I've already probably talked too much,
So
but it's so great. Must see.
yeah, so like I said, I'm watching Fear the Walking Dead and Better Call Saul at the same time because they come on pretty much the same time on AMC. And I just can't help but compare them. Like you're watching two shows.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like exhausted from Fear, like I'm like, oh, that was just so bad. And then literally the very first shot in Better Call Saul is better than the whole episode.
Yeah.
Like there was like only one.
If like your power went out and all you saw was the first scene, you'd be satisfied.
Yeah,
right.
Like it blows. So I remember this is spoiler, but not the very, very first shot. And we're going to get into this more in coming weeks. The very first shot of season 6, and it blew my mind, was ties. Like ties that you wear were dropped into a hamper or something. They're just dropping. And it was going from black all the way to colorful ones. Like I said, we're going to talk about this later, but that imagery blew my mind, especially after being exhausted from an episode of Fear. And I was like, what did I just watch? Like almost like I was so refreshed, and like I just obviously they put a lot of thought, and I was like, how did they even do that shot? Like stuff like that. Like like you go from like caring about the characters and really being happy on how they present everything to how are they doing like these technical things? Like your brain just goes, well, my brain at least goes like all over the place. Like I'm like, that's just incredible. Like that's what I want to do. If I made a TV series, I don't even know if I could because it's so well done. Obviously, it's hard, but like I appreciate it basically when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say sometimes they can use degrees with the colors. So like if someone shows up wearing a pink shirt, it might not be a straight up evil villain. They might just be someone who's mixed up with a bad guy or did something a little bit bad. So, but and at tie scene, by the way, I found out that it looks like okay. So another piece of Better Call Saul is it the opening sequence of each season is a flash forward. The show as a whole is like a flashback to before Breaking Bad, but the first sequence of first season is a flash forward to post Breaking Bad, and I don't think this is too spoilery because it's just integral to the whole series of any of them. And I'll also point out, just in general, the nature of spoilers. If it's really good in the first place, it's hard to spoil it. It's more about how it happens than what happens. You know?
I feel like they play on that too in that series. But anyways,
so I'll go ahead and say that, unsurprisingly, in Breaking Bad, Walter White's drug empire starts to fall apart, and Saul's wrapped up in it, and so he gets out of town. He like goes to this guy that gets him like a fake ID and goes somewhere else, and we don't see any more of him. But in Better Call Saul, we do. What we see is this flash forward to him in this new hidden life, and he's just like a manager at a Cinnabon in a mall or something, and just trying to stay low key. He looks a little bit different or whatever. And these scenes are presented to us in black and white. So for one, they get to hide color clues from us. So if someone comes around, we don't know if it's a good guy or a bad guy, But in this season, when it starts what as we expect in black and white with these ties kind of falling. It's kind of like an above shot looking down into, like Eric said, someone's a hamper container of some sort as ties fall down. And they slowly, though, it's like color is added.
Yep.
As the ties fall down. Saul is known for, usually wearing kind of flashy, gaudy colors and ties, in his suits. And so and we're piecing together that these are Saul's ties, and as it's like just a plain, white tie with black stripes, and then
Exactly.
like maybe a black and white checkered tie.
Mhm.
But then here comes a black tie with white speckles and a little hint of purple dots on it, and another tie that's black and white and pink stripes, and another tie, and then eventually it's like a bright red tie with yellow
Yep.
flowers on it, and I found out, Eric, I thought that what they did was like add color to it through the course of that scene, but they just used different color ties. They just started off with actual black and white ties, and then ties that had a little bit of color, and then gaudy, bright color ties. They just used different ties to
I
build
figured that
color
was like all
in that
real, but
scene.
it's still like
An amazing effect, and a
exactly.
good way to
And then
play with
obviously
our
they did it in
expectations.
slow motion, which slow
Yeah.
motion is also like impactful if you do it right, especially if you do it right. Oh God, yeah, it's just.
And sometimes I'm telling you, sometimes watching that show, I am almost brought to tears with the dilemmas that some of the characters are faced
Mhm.
with, whether it's with their family members or their morals that are in question, or
Yes.
the threats that they face, or I mean, I cannot go on enough about how good that show is. So
And we are
actually,
going to go into depth
yeah,
with it next week, hopefully. Like we want to analyze each episode basically when it comes right down to it, because I think there's going to be 13 episodes overall. I've heard in the final
yeah,
season.
they're going to split the season up. I think that we've had 3 so far. Or is it 4 already? I think there's already been 4.
Yeah.
And in the next 3 weeks, we're going to get 3 more.
Mm.
Then they're going to take a break for, I don't know, a month or so.
Oh.
And then come back with 6 more episodes after that.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, but that's good. So we're going to analyze each of these, just dive into each of the episodes, and talk about Saul.
Better talk Saul.
Yeah, better talk. So if you like this content, I will be posting a schedule. I'm hoping to keep the same schedule for next week and the weeks to come for this Better Call Saul talk. But I'll make a post of it on Twitter. But yeah, so our top 10, went from like Avatar all the way to shows like Breaking Bad.
Is it worth recapping?
I'm sorry, Better Call Saul. Yeah. Let me see. Let me pull up my little thingy. Give me a sec. Oop. So here's the list. Here's the list that we see on here. So we have a 10th. Now, obviously, these could be out of order, but Batman and Avatar. And let me pull up another list. Sorry, to make sure I'm not missing anything. Batman, Avatar. Yeah, we put as 10. 9 was Fleabag, and 24. And American Idol.
Shouldn't there be 3 in each list, or are you just going to do mine and yours?
Well, no, some of them were combined. Like I had Avatar.
We both chose the same one.
Yeah, that's why it makes this a little tricky. But 24 and yeah, American Idol. 8th was Lost, Firefly, and Golden Boy. 7 was Rumbling Hearts, This Is Us, and I feel like one of them was Atlanta. I think
Atlanta
it was
on
Atlanta.
my list. I don't remember the exact order, but
yeah. We have House on 6. Firefly was one of them.
You already said Firefly.
Oh wait. I said Lost and Firefly, right? Did I say Lost?
Yeah.
I may have mixed it up, but Lost and Firefly is one of them. Trigun. We have
had Better Things.
Yeah, Better Things. I knew was on there. I knew that was one of them I didn't have on the list. Game of Thrones. This is 5, and Fullmetal Alchemist.
Have you said General Hospital yet?
That's 4. General Hospital.
Okay, yeah.
The Office. Like both of us said, The Office. 3 is Simpsons, Guyver, and Hunter x Hunter. And then 2 was Star Trek, Walking Dead, and I think that was it because it was a mix. And then the last one was Battle Athletes and Better Call Saul.
So what are the ones that we have multiple picks on? Better Call Saul,
Better Call Saul.
Office,
Game of Thrones,
and Avatar.
Yes.
And you didn't say Lost on your list?
I did not, even though it's a really good show. But
yeah, but that's a good 3: Game of Thrones, Better Call Saul, The Office, Avatar. That's 4 different ones.
That's 4 different ones. Yeah.
Yeah. If we convince anyone out there to watch those 4 shows, we've done our job.
We have.
Can I throw out a couple more things real quick? I think we've been going for like 2.5 hours already, but
you're right.
I want to name a couple shows that I think would make my favorites list that didn't make this must-see list. I just want to throw them out there. Pin 15. It's about like a coming-of-age story of 2 young girls. And there's another one called Baskets, which was, I don't know, kind of an awkward comedy, another FX show. It's got I can't remember his name. Zach Galifianakis. And then I think I talked to you about this before, Eric, but I wanted to throw it out here. 5 shows that I specifically recommend to you.
Yeah.
Also shows that are high on my favorite and must-see list. Just didn't quite make the top 10. But one is Misfits, which is a British show that's like, I don't know, it's hard to peg what it is. It's like part sci-fi, part horror, part comedy, part romance. It's about these young, I wouldn't say kids, but like 20-ish, that mess something up in their life and are doing like community service, and it's something against superpowers, different types. It's a very interesting show. Crashing, I think, is the one I told you. It's about the stand-up comedian, not the Phoebe Waller-Bridges one who did Fleabag, but a different show, Pete Holmes.
Right.
It's a very a lot of insight into the world of stand-up comedy, but also like a kind of moral understandings of life and how to be a good person kind of themes to that show. Eric is the Ricky Gervais, who made The Office, and it's a similar presentation, but instead of like a work office, it's like a retirement home. And so it's about the older people who live there and the people that take care of them. It's got some very funny but some very touching moments in it. Black Mirror is sort of an anthology show. It's almost like the Twilight Zone. Every episode stands on its own. I usually take some sort of piece of technology and kind of make it pervasive in the world and see where things would go from there. And a lot of the episodes are kind of horror-ish. And finally, Hell 2 is another show I think you might particularly like from a filmmaking aspect. It's this guy he's just like addicted to filming. He just walks around with a camera and just films everything. And eventually he like edits together enough material on some topic, and he'll start off with like how to make a lasagna, and the next thing you know, he's interviewing someone about like drug addiction, and you're like, how did we get to this? And by the end of it, you're like, yeah, we should be good neighbors to each other. It's a really humorous, awkward, insightful, unique show.
Awesome. Also, Horns, before he left, he said that Code Geass he loves, which is it's an anime that's really good. There's just a lot of themes on it. I remember the ending. I cried on it because I was like, that was a pretty powerful statement with what they built.
As long as we're hitting on a lot of different animes, I'll throw out another one that I watched kind of recently that's sort of a classic. I think it came out around the same time as Cowboy Bebop that I was really blown away by. Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh, Evangelion? Yep.
Evangelion, yeah. Did I say it wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because they did a remake of it, I guess, which I haven't seen the remake, and I think it just finished. But there was the original, like in the 1990s, and it was like one of the...
Yeah, that's when I saw.
The breakout, like, actually they redubbed it too, which is funny. So I actually have the original dubs because I have the VHS. That's how old it is. And I feel like when Dragon Ball, and I was saying Guyver was one of the first, I feel like people, like Evangelion changed everything, like on how you tell a story in that media, because people were thinking like Dragon Ball was like kind of a way of robo tech or something like that. But Evangelion was like just straight up serious and had all these philosophies in it, so definitely give props to Evangelion.
It was more symbolic and abstract and less like plot driven or whatever. It sort of had a plot, but especially by the end, you're like, I barely understand what's happening here, but it's making me think a lot, Yep.
Yep. I mean, the ending actually made people so mad that they told him to make a movie, and it pissed off the director so much. He's like, I'll make you a movie. and
the movie was just
happy.
as weird and convoluted as the ending of the show, right?
Yeah.
Because people were so
depressing.
caught up with wanting to know what happens next,
Yeah.
and he was more caught up with conveying this emotion of confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I loved it. I'd be hesitant to recommend it to people because it's not very standard, but
No.
but I think it is unique and outstanding, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like not to belay this too much longer, but just the nature of like must see. I think you need a certain foundation of shows before you see something really out there like that.
Yeah.
But once you have a certain foundation of shows, that's what you start to look for. You know what I mean? Like, so, and sometimes your foundation, we're naming sort of like classic, well-known, high-quality stuff. But if that's the only thing you ever saw, it's relative. Like, what is must see? What is your favorite? What is best? It's kind of relative to what you've seen. And most people's foundation of stuff is just what was on TV when they were a kid. Does that make sense? And it's changing more so nowadays because you can choose what to watch through streaming. But for most of history, even the history of TV is only 100 years, but it's just been what was on when you were home. And so, it's the big popular classic shows through the, I don't know, through the generations for us, I don't know, the 90s-ish time periods with Law and Order and Seinfeld, Friends, those are the things that were on TV. But and those aren't necessarily even bad, but that's sort of our foundation.
Yeah.
But then eventually, and even other things we named just now, like a Star Trek or Jeopardy, things like that, But then eventually we find something like Game of Thrones or Better Call Saul, like, holy crap, this is really good. You know what I mean? But what we thought was good before, no, this is really good. And I think if you see Neon Genesis just out of nowhere, you might be like, what is this? Why would people watch this? But if you see Cowboy Bebop and Fullmetal Alchemist and, some of these others that we've named or others we haven't even named, I don't know, freaking Transformers and G.I. Joe, and then you see Neon Genesis, you're like, whoa, you can really do something outstanding with anime,
Yeah. All right, but we're going to wrap it up. And like I said, next week we should be here for Better Call Saul episode 1, the pilot of 6. Really not a pilot, it's just the beginning episode. But anyways.
I should maybe ask you, Eric, do you think that we're just going to be a few episodes behind? Or do you think we'll try to like cover 2 or 3 and catch up?
I will keep people posted because that's something that me and you need to discuss because it's a tricky thing. When they aired episode 1, they actually aired 2 episodes, episode 1 and 2.
Makes it even trickier, right?
So like, do we do 1 per week? Do we do both of them all at once? The show's so complicated.
I was thinking of it. I was wondering if we should do like a recap even to get to where we are at the beginning.
I thought about that, but it's tricky because I almost want to rewatch the whole series over again, and so yeah, it's
tough.
We
can get highlight moments.
Highlight moments.
I think we could like watch a couple episodes and do some research and get highlight moments. When I did The Boys, I covered The Boys for season 2.
That's true.
And so I think what I did for season 1, but like leading up to season 2, I think I did an episode for episode 1, and then I did like 2, 3, 4 together, 5, 6, 7 together, and then an episode just for the finale, and then started with the new season. Maybe we could do something like that.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about it. So keep you up to date. I'll keep you up to date on exactly what's going on. But overall, we're definitely covering the final season. So it's going to be spoilers if you want to watch it if you haven't seen it. Maybe you'll just enjoy hearing us talk about it and then get invested in to watch it. But recommend watch it. Because there's going to be a lot that we're going to be diving into.
Love talking about all this with you, Eric, and anyone out there who is listening, especially if you stuck it through for 3 hours or whatever we did, or maybe just skip to the end. But follow me on Twitter or even Facebook at DancingSean and YouTube also. Like, I would love to get your feedback or hear or share ideas with you about all this stuff. So
awesome. Well, everyone, you have a good night and thanks for coming. Bye-bye.